What is the role of potash in Canada's economy?
It's very significant, particularly in Saskatchewan. 100% of all the potash produced in Canada is produced in Saskatchewan.
Of the potash that is generated in Saskatchewan, how much of it's consumed domestically in Canada? How much of it's exported, and to whom?
Yeah, very little is used in Canada and very little in Saskatchewan. So there's probably over 98% of what is produced in Canada, and again, all in Saskatchewan, is exported to global markets. So of that, about 50% goes into the United States to help farmers there grow, corn, soybean, and oats. And the rest is exported out to countries like China, India, Indonesia, and Brazil are probably the main customers.
Fortunately for U.S. farmers and for Canada's miners, Canadian potash has been kept free from tariffs, something former Deputy Prime Minister Freeland considers wise for all concerned.
Two of the world's other leading potash producers after the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. So I'm going to offer a little Canadian editorial here. A particularly bad time to have a trade war with Canada. There are lots of reasons a trade war with Canada is a bad idea. You need Canadian aluminum, for example, for U.S. manufacturing, and aluminum is basically electricity in solid form. But the fact that Canada is such a major producer of potash is another good reason that we're a great trading partner.
That does it for us here at Wall Street Week. I'm David Weston. See you next week for more stories of capitalism.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives, and that revolution is playing out in real time. From finance to defense tech, AI to entertainment, from the road to the stars. Bloomberg is bringing you the stories of companies and people that are pushing tech to new frontiers, and the politics reshaping global tech markets. I'm Ed Ludlow, live in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Tech.
Every weekday, only on Bloomberg Television.
Oh, hello there. Just wanted to say, Primer is back. We've been scouring the frontiers of science and technology to help explain the difference between the next gold rush and whatever this thing is. And in season 2, we're upping the stakes. More danger.
Now that is some high-grade uranium mineralization.
We used to have a stable climate on this Earth. Right now, we do not.
More science.
We're pushing the envelope of technology in multiple directions: software, hardware, chemistry, physics.
The cable is very cold.
And more CEOs that can nail the photo shoot.
Hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars are at stake.
While the problems are economic, the solutions are too.
And yes, we will be talking about AI.
There is a lot of humanoid hype out there.
But our future doesn't run on hype. It runs on innovation. Watch season 2 on all these lovely channels.
Welcome to the world of decentralized finance. Bloomberg is covering all things crypto, the people, the transactions, and the technology. Bloomberg Crypto, Tuesdays only on Bloomberg. Wednesday, the Fed decides.
Share wars just around the corner, setting the stage for a real debate. Is this meeting live or not?
Our number one objective is getting policy right. And if we get policy right, we can deliver lower prices.
Trust Bloomberg to bring you the fastest coverage and exclusive analysis.
The sum of this is real GDP and the inflation piled on top of it.
That's going to cause inflation that does come into consumer goods in other ways.
Tune in to Bloomberg Surveillance. The Fed decides, starting at 1:30 p.m. Eastern.
Coming up on Bloomberg This Weekend, a White House Correspondents Dinner redo.
It's great to be back at place that I know very well because I built it. As I said 3 months ago, the show must go on.
President Trump takes the stage again at the annual dinner 3 months after a gunman stormed security lines at the Washington Hilton. His comments on the war with Iran and crucial midterm elections.
Splash landing. SpaceX launches its massive Starship rocket in the first test flight since going public. Will this help boost the company's shares?
And new this morning, an exclusive interview with Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang. His push for more inclusive AI and what he's saying about the growing competition from China.
They're producing more AI researchers than probably all of the world has, in any given year. If manufacturing intelligence is important, they manufacture the most important version of it, which is the researchers.
Welcome to the weekend, everybody, and welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend. We're coming to you live from our world headquarters here in New York. I'm Christina Ruffini.
And I'm David Gura, alongside Lisa Mateo. It is Saturday, July the 25th. Welcome to our listeners and viewers all across Bloomberg's platforms on radio, television, streaming on Bloomberg.com, and watching us on the Bloomberg Business app. And a busy morning this morning. I should note, though, after 13 consecutive nights of strikes led by the U.S. and the Middle East, none happened last night. The president was at this postponed White House Correspondents Association dinner, and we saw what seems like a pause in the attacks by the U.S.
There is some action, though, now on the other side of that waterway, and that's in the Red Sea. We're seeing some attacks possibly from the Houthis against some shipping materials. There's reports that the U.S. might have fired on a ship trying to break that blockade there. And then we're also going to talk about a couple different things. We've got the Ukrainian president is going to the White House, we believe, next week. We're going to talk about the status of that conflict there, what's going on with the cabinet shuffles. And then we're also going to talk about some fun things, including the new Odyssey and the translation and why the classics are suddenly so popular.
All right, having a renaissance.
But first, we're going to go to Lisa with the headlines.
You got it. Let's start with that dinner, guys. Last night, President Trump headlined a scaled-down White House Correspondents Dinner 3 months after the original event was cut short by a gunman. Now, he criticized several reporters by name while also saying he had respect for journalism and the press. He also spoke about the war in Iran.
They are talking to us right now. They'd love to make a deal. I don't think they're ready to. I don't think it's time yet, but I'm willing to listen.
It was Trump's first time speaking at the annual event, which he did not attend during his first term. Now, before attending the dinner, President Trump hosted the leaders of 4 advanced nuclear reactor companies at the White House to commend their technology hitting a milestone. Trump sees nuclear reactors as a key source of power for data centers and economic growth. While he was there, the president took questions from reporters about the exit strategy in Iran.
There's 2 ways. I mean, it's you can just keep doing exactly what we're doing and take them apart piece by piece. We can do it in a more rapid fashion, which we might do, or we can negotiate with them, which we're also doing right now.
Either way, President Trump added that the U.S. is locked and loaded and ready to go. Meanwhile, the Houthis have now claimed to have struck southern Saudi Arabia with missiles on the Red Sea coast. Now, this comes after Saudi-led coalition forces in Yemen carried out a military operation against Houthi military targets near a port in the southern Red Sea. While the escalation compounds are already a severe squeeze on regional energy flows, the U.S. military, though, did not announce any strikes on Iran overnight, and Iranian media did not report any Islamic strikes on U.S. bases. The Trump administration facing fresh legal challenge to the president's latest round of global tariffs that took effect Friday. Small businesses filed lawsuits in the U.S. Court of International Trade, accusing President Trump and U.S. officials of unlawfully using Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 to replace earlier tariffs that were struck down by the Supreme Court. The Trump administration announced Thursday that the U.S. will collect duties of between 10% and 12.5% on imports from most major trading partners. And in other news, SpaceX's Starship, well, it launched to space in its first major test since the company's initial public offering. It lifted off from the company's Starbase facility in South Texas last night and deployed 20 Starlink satellites. SpaceX has spent more than $15 billion developing Starship. It was actually the rocket's 13th flight. David and Christina.
We know from Ed Ludlow this is going to be important for them going forward.
Big deal.
Getting that more practice for that rocket.
That's right. Thanks, Lisa. We could all use a little bit more practice.
Sure.
All Right. Speaking of do-overs, last night, as Lisa mentioned, President Trump returned to the White House Correspondents Dinner. The initial dinner, of course, ended abruptly after a gunman breached security.
Well, the president condemned political violence at the dinner last night, while at the same time attacking political opponents and the press at large.
But tonight we come back together to answer that heinous attack with unwavering resolve, and every one of us here this evening to show that in America we do not yield to political violence. As I said 3 months ago, the show must go on. But this place is really the largest group of Trump derangement syndrome people ever put together at one time, I suspect. This evening, it's really all about the fake news media and your handling of prizes and writing and producing and performing made-up stories like the Academy Awards. And this is somewhat of a scoop. My intention to run for a 4th term as President of the United States. I will be doing that. I will be having an official, in fact, I think I have, I won 3 times. Now I'm going to do it again. Thank you.
Joining us now is Bloomberg White House correspondent Jeff Mason. He was at last night's dinner. He was president in the past of the White House Correspondents Association. Jeff, great to see you. And I guess I should start just by asking you about the feeling in the room. We were all there at the first iteration of this dinner. Took place at the Washington Hilton, a giant ballroom. This was a much smaller affair, different affair. How much was the program last night duplicative of what was supposed to happen at that first dinner just a couple of months ago?
I think it was pretty close. In fact, the fact that, of course, the president spoke, the president of the association spoke, the awards were given to members of the press, and also student journalists were recognized for scholarships. And then there was the mentalist at the end as well. It was pretty much the program that was meant to have gone on in April, just 3 months later. And with the fact that that shooting stopped that dinner, that was overshadowing, I guess you could say, this dinner again. But in general, the program was the same, but the venue was smaller, and that was very noticeable, certainly for someone who's attended a bunch of dinners. The ballroom at the Hilton, of course, fits more than 2,000 people. It's the biggest ballroom in Washington. This one was, instead of about 2,600 people, there were fewer than 700 in the room. That doesn't mean it's small, but it's just a much, much more, I guess you could say, intimate size of a dinner, and that changed the mood in the room too. And we can talk a little bit more about this, but when the president spoke, I think that he also was speaking to what for him was an unusual crowd, in that most of the people in that room were journalists like myself, and it was not a friendly crowd for what ended up being very much like a rally speech.
That's an interesting point, Jeff, because, I mean, we attended the first dinner, and it is a huge ballroom, as you mentioned, and it's a mixed crowd because the journalists invite so many guests. You have entertainment people. You often invite people who are familiar or close to the White House. This is a much smaller room, and I imagine, if he's used to speaking to a bigger crowd, it's harder when the audience is right in front of you and you can see some of those reactions. I mean, what were the reactions to jokes like, I'm assuming it was a joke, running for a 4th term, and some of the other remarks? And then there were also, you wrote, a few awkward moments where awards were presented to journalists for being hard on this White House. How did the president react to that?
Yeah, I mean, to your first question first, the reaction were a lot of straight faces in the crowd, because that's our job, I mean, I certainly was keeping a straight face, and I think so were most of the reporters in the room, who are committed to neutrally covering this president, and recognize that joke, as it were, of him running for what he'd call the 4th term is a joke about the Constitution, which of course prohibits him from running for another term when he's already served 2, which he will have at the end of his 2nd term now. But it's also again a quote unquote joke that is rooted in the fact that that's something that he was actively thinking about at the beginning of this term, and something that he has openly mused about before. I think right now it is a joke. I mean, he has stopped talking about it regularly, particularly after Speaker of the House Mike Johnson basically told him this is unconstitutional, and he seems to have accepted that. And so I think he likes to poke at the press with stuff like that, and that was one of the things that he did last night. Remind me your other question, Christina.
That's all right, Jeff. We can move on. I know you've had like 3 hours of sleep, so we're very grateful for you getting up. A friend of the show, Jeff Mason. We really appreciate you. David, go ahead.
Just a generous, I mean, there's been this, over the course of having this dinner, there's been a conversation about should it be smaller? Should it involve fewer celebrities, fewer members of the administration? I'm curious, as you experienced the dinner last night, did it give you a sense of maybe this is the way that it's headed? In light of the criticism most recently that it faced after that first dinner, how has the conversation about the longevity of this dinner changed, in the context of the one that we had last night?
I think the answer to that is still TBD. The incoming president of the association, Jackie Heinrich, who works for Fox News, announced that the dinner would be held again next year back at the Hilton. So that was certainly a foreshadowing by the association that they're not looking to keep the scaled down version as a model. But yes, you're not wrong to say that this sparked a lot of conversation, certainly about security at the Hilton and security for this event. But it also sparked some conversation within the press corps itself about this dinner more broadly. And it's, there are people who are big fans of this dinner in Washington, and there are people who aren't. And I imagine those conversations will continue.
Jeff Mason, come back here in a little bit. We're going to let you take a nap over the course of the next maybe 40 minutes. Bring you back here in just a little time. Take a quick disco nap. Jeff Mason, our White House correspondent, joining us on the heels of the White House Correspondents Association dinner, which took place last night.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, just hours ago, the UK Maritime Trade Operations Center warned of an incident involving a tanker and military forces in the Gulf of Oman, and is warning vessels in the area to remain diligent.
Joining us now is Bloomberg Energy and Commodities reporter Stephen Sobczynski, who joins us now from Singapore. Stephen, great to have you with us. And I want to start just by asking you how the contours of this war have changed here in recent days. The Houthis, which are, of course, aligned with the Iranians, getting into this conflict, announcing this blockade. And maybe I could ask you first, just sort of what effect that's had so far on the oil trade, and sort of what traders, what investors are thinking about the consequences of that going forward.
I think the market is still trying to digest exactly what is happening in the Red Sea and at the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, which is where the Houthis are trying to tighten control. Now, let's put this into context. Since the Strait of Hormuz closed effectively since the end of February, when the U.S. and Israel began strikes on Iran, Saudi Arabia was beginning to ship more of its oil. 4 million barrels per day were loaded in the Red Sea through an east-west pipeline. Normally, that oil would be flowing through Hormuz. It was shut, so they were using this workaround. The oil would then go south, down through the Red Sea, through the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, and then out to customers in Asia. And what's happened is, with the Houthi rebels increasing attacks targeting specifically Saudi ships, there was a fear that this key workaround was now in danger and either would lead to delays or even a reduction in loading from Saudi ports, because that would require them going through the north, through the Suez Canal, through and then around the southern Cape of Africa to get the customers in Asia. We did see a few ships U-turn over the last week away from the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, but in the last 24 hours, we did see 2 China-linked super oil tankers, though carrying Saudi crude, did get through. So it's a mixed picture. There is some oil flowing through, but at the same time, there are some ships turning around. And you saw oil prices. Brent was about $100 a barrel when I was leaving the office Asia afternoon, but it closed the session U.S. afternoon around $96, $97, which indicates a bit of a fall after those Red Sea flows continued. But at the same time, you have to remember, this is Friday. You never know what Trump's going to do. It was probably a lot of people just wanting to enjoy their weekend as well and not have to worry about having a long position going in. But at the same time, the market, the way they're looking at this, it is a risk. And this is the biggest escalation of the war in the region and attacks on infrastructure and risk to oil that we've seen since March and April.
I'm wondering, can you define that risk a little bit? Because I know, according to a report from CBS, at least 7 major pipeline projects are under construction, trying to find alternatives to the Strait. And I know the main threat right now in the Red Sea is the distribution point. But we've also got reports this morning the Houthis have claimed to have struck Saudi Arabia with missiles on Saturday morning. Is the concern mostly about that Red Sea distribution point, or is the concern also that an escalation between Saudis and the Houthis could start to impact Saudi production as well?
I think that's a really good point, and it's both. I would go even a step further that any sort of flare-up between Saudi Arabia and the Houthis attacking ships, Trump himself has said that they will then, if their ships attacked by the Houthis, they will then attack Iran, and he's threatened power plants and bridges. Iran, in time, said that if that happens, they will attack energy infrastructure throughout the region. The biggest risk in this war since February hasn't necessarily been the closure of these straits. These waterways, sure, they could be closed, but with a good peace deal, they could open up within weeks, and trade could resume to normal in months. The real fear has been if this escalates into a wider conflict within the region, if energy infrastructure, pipelines, liquefied natural gas plants, ships, if they're getting attacked, that's infrastructure that can't easily come back online if there is a peace deal. So the reason why oil was at $120 in March wasn't so much because of the Hormuz closure. It was because Iran kept attacking infrastructure across the region. We haven't gotten to that worst case scenario that we've seen 3 or 4 months back. But if it does spiral into that sort of situation, yeah, certainly that is something that the market is going to be deeply worried about. And if Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, other countries, Qatar's LNG export plant, if all of those facilities are either damaged more or if they have to reduce production, then certainly we'll see another leg up in Brent and WTI oil prices.
Stephen, I sat down with Fatih Birol a few weeks ago, and we talked about the state of inventories around the world and if countries have begun to kind of refill those reserves that they had in the lulls that we've seen. Sounds like they haven't. Can you just get us up to speed sort of on the status of reserves globally? I know there's been a lot of focus here in the U.S. where the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is the lowest it's been in a very long time. How much effort has there been around the world to kind of replenish those reserves that have been deployed on an emergency basis since the start of this conflict?
I think the better way to look at it, perhaps, is that a lot of customers in Asia of Persian Gulf oil, they were looking at replacing their supply instead of replenishing. So there hasn't been a really big effort to refill inventories. As you said, the SPR in the United States, lowest level in decades. Cushing as well, a key point. It's getting low. It continues to decrease. Chinese oil inventories are something that are opaque. You're not exactly sure what's going on there, but there is an expectation that China used quite a lot of their oil inventories when their imports dropped pretty significantly in April, May, and then into June. And then Japan as well. All the other G7 nations had been using their SPR. So you're in a situation where oil inventories are low, but it's not just oil; it's also other fuels, diesel, gasoline, jet fuel. The amount of supply globally is at an uncomfortable level, and that's why you're seeing those product prices rise as well. And it's also not just oil products, it's also natural gas in Europe. Natural gas inventories at the lowest seasonal level in about 5 years. They're not on pace to hit an 80% target refill by November, which is what they want to be at when winter starts, because in winter in Europe, they use a lot of natural gas for heating. So inventories are a problem. And I think the issue is we pulled that lever in March and April to help ease some of the pain in the oil market. And because of this current situation with depleted inventories, you can't really pull that lever again if this Hormuz closure continues and if the Bab el-Mandeb Strait as well is affected. So it is a worrying part of the market.
Are you starting to see that stress a little bit in the prices of oil? I mean, it seems to me, as we've been covering this conflict, there's been kind of this indefatigable optimism, somewhat frustrating optimism for those of us who cover diplomacy, that this is going to get resolved. But I'm wondering if that's because they did have those strategic reserves as kind of a buffer, and as those start to deplete, do you think that optimism will start to wane as well?
I think there are a few reasons why oil has. I mean, granted, we're at $100 Brent in just a few short weeks. So I would say that we're at a pretty relatively high level. We're not at the highs of 120 that we were before, and we're certainly not near $200, which is what some analysts were warning about. Part of that is because of the workarounds. The Saudi Arabia's Red Sea, the East-West pipeline they had there, ADNOC in the UAE being able to do their shuttle service to get some oil out, which is to a degree continuing, perhaps, although those ships are going dark. As well, Chinese demand has not really returned, and China is one of the big factors. They're the biggest buyer of oil globally. So as long as Chinese demand doesn't come roaring back, that does add a lot of length, and it does provide some ease to the market. But I would say it is showing up in some prices. I mean, you look at the diesel run rate, or basically the profits that you can make from refining crude into diesel, gasoline, and other products has jumped. There is a need for those fuels, and there is a fear that those supplies are depleting. Natural gas supply is natural gas in Europe. Those prices are at a settled basis at the highest level since 2023. LNG prices in Asia are at the highest level since March, and almost the highest level since January 2023. So you are starting to see some of that pain, maybe not showing up in crude itself, which is about $20 off from the highs of March, but you're seeing it in other products.
Steve, before we let you go, let me ask you about another shooting war, the one taking place in Ukraine, and the effect that that's had on energy prices. We've talked a lot about the crack spread in recent weeks on this show, talked about refined products, and we've seen Ukraine launching those attacks on energy facilities in Russia, and we've seen Russia reply in kind, targeting energy facilities in Ukraine. What's our sense of the broader implications of that on the global energy market, the way that that's escalated?
I mean, that's one more lever that the market was depending on that is now gone. So let's look at it from a crude perspective. The Black Sea is a key export area for Kazakhstan oil. It goes to the CPC through the CPC pipeline to a Russian port. And right now, Moscow has basically said that it is unsafe for them to be docking there. Ukraine has targeted in recent weeks over 90 ships that are connected with Moscow. So you're removing those Kazakhstan supplies, which I believe is about 1 to 1.5% of global seaborne oil supply. It's not nothing. So again, with Bab el-Mandeb Strait, with Hormuz, that's one amount of oil that's reduced. Then you look at the refining capacity in Russia, which has been greatly affected and disrupted by constant attacks by Iran on the refineries. And Russia is a pretty big supplier and exporter of that fuel. And they've had to restrain and essentially stop exports of diesel. Again, that tightens the global diesel market. So you're getting the crude hit from Kazakhstan and also the diesel hit, again, tightening things for consumers globally.
All right, Stephen Sipczynski, thank you for breaking that all down for us. I learned a running rate. I learned a diesel run rate. I learned something new today from Stephen, so thank you so much.
Your glossary of terms.
Don't quiz me. Don't quiz me on any more global energy terms. You get 1 week of that, and then I need a break.
Save it for the holiday show. We can do it. The year in review.
It'll be something to look forward to. All right, let's check in again with Lisa Mateo for the headlines.
You got it. We're starting overseas. Massive forest fires. They do continue to rage out of control. This is in central Spain. Now, authorities have evacuated more than 60,000 people. Dozens of firefighters, they've been injured, but no deaths have been reported. Strong winds, well, they have complicated those efforts to control the blaze, which has been fueled by a heat wave. Well, Southern Korea President Lee Jae-myung has wrapped up a 2-day visit to San Francisco, meeting with global AI leaders, Silicon Valley venture capitalists, and also Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang. Now, Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow, he spoke exclusively with Huang at a Korean AI summit, who said this is a golden age for the nation.
Their semiconductor business is booming. Their industrial business is booming. This is a country that has the ability to help the world build out the AI infrastructure. That they're incredibly adept at adopting new technologies.
Nvidia has teamed up with SK Group to build more than 2 gigawatts of AI data centers on the Korean peninsula. Well, Samsung has won a contract worth more than $200 billion to make chips for Broadcom. Now, the pact will run for 5 years through 2030 and will focus on Samsung's 2-nanometer and below process technologies for Broadcom's products. That deal will expand the two companies' collaboration across memory and foundry technology. Paramount, Skydance, and Warner Brothers Discovery say they will hold off on closing their $110 billion deal until June, unless the legal fight over the merger is resolved sooner. California and 11 other states have sued to block the merger. It's a pricey pause for Paramount, though, which has agreed to pay roughly $7 million per day to Warner Brothers shareholders beginning October 1st until that deal is closed. David and Christina, that's a lot of money.
It's Mateo's salary, $7 million a day.
It's a lot.
We pay.
Yeah, she's very low-key about it, but of course, she is our fanciest colleague. Thanks for coming in, Lisa, despite the millions. We appreciate it.
Worth.
All right.
All right, the Trump administration plans to replace expiring tariffs with new ones based on accusations concerning forced labor. Using Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974, new tariffs of 10 or 12.5% will be placed on 60 nations that supply almost all U.S. imports.
The administration is also laying groundwork for additional Section 301 levies as other investigations are ongoing. For more on this Trump tariff wall, joining us now is Bloomberg Global Trade Editor Brendan Murray. Brendan, I am, as someone who covers this, very confused as to what's happening. What is the timeline for these? When are they going into place, and who is adjudicating this?
Yeah, so let's try to unravel this. So we had the 301 tariffs that took effect on 60 economies on Friday, and those range from 10 to 12.5%, and that is basically 99% of countries that ship goods to the U.S. So it's a pretty broad brush that got hit with those tariffs. There's also Brazil was hit with 301 tariffs this week of 25%. Now, a lot of things are carved out: coffee, beef, and other things that aren't really that the U.S. doesn't want to hurt U.S. consumers over. And then we have this the excess capacity 301 case that is ongoing. We don't know if it's a couple of weeks or maybe a couple of months away, but that one is really targeted at Chinese industrial overcapacity. But it loops in a lot of other countries as well, the European Union among them, and so. What we're seeing and what we saw this week really was the president flexing his tariff muscles again. We hadn't really heard much about trade wars since the Supreme Court dealt him a loss back in February and the Iran war started. But he sent several reminders this week that he has the authority to use tariffs, and he wants to use them still, even amid the concerns about affordability heading into the midterm elections.
Christina, it was about 24 hours ago. I got Brendan on the phone. We talked shortly after these.
I know. I heard you guys talked without me. It's fine. I'm not all upset. Whatever.
And at the time, Brendan, I asked you just about the market reaction, and it was pretty muted. And I'm curious now that some more time has passed here, what you make of that. So we have these tariffs of 10 to 12.5%. They replaced these other temporary tariffs that were in place after that Supreme Court decision. What explains the market shrug here? Is it the general rate here kind of remains roughly the same as it did after those temporary tariffs went into effect?
Yeah, exactly. This is basically a continuation of the 10% baseline that was set up after the Supreme Court ruling went against the president. So 10% is basically the fee that, that if you want to play in the U.S. market, the 10% is the baseline pretty much for everybody. I think another factor here, and Josh Lipsky of the Atlantic Council wrote about this this week, is that remember on Liberation Day and in the immediate weeks afterwards, the bond market really went after the president and the president had to retreat from those reciprocal tariffs. And now the financial markets are really just kind of baking in the fact that the U.S. government needs tariff revenue and is kind of looking at tariffs as sort of a necessary evil now compared to the punishing the market sell-off that followed the Liberation Day tariffs. And so I think what we're seeing is markets markets and companies just absorbing these shocks that we're seeing. We had another one that we haven't talked about, the 50% tariff threat against Canada, which sort of came out of nowhere earlier this week and really kind of raised some eyebrows as to this is an authority he invoked that's never been used before. It's almost 100 years old. And is this the new tool that he's going to use to go after countries individually? Bloomberg Economics expects this as sort of a trial run against Canada, and maybe he could use it against other economies. But the president, definitely made a lot of headlines this week on tariffs. And Jameson Greer testified to Congress, and Democrats really tried to hammer him on the affordability issue. But he pretty successfully fended off some of those criticisms by saying, look, inflation is lower than it was when the president took office. And so I think what we have shaping up here is a real economic and political debate in the 3 or 4 months here before the November midterms.
You bring up Josh Lipsky of the Atlantic Council, and Catherine Lucy, our colleague, interviewed him for a piece that she wrote as well. And he talked about the stickiness of these tariffs and the way that he sees these as kind of permanent. They're not going to go away. And I think there's a tendency here to think, oh, maybe if a Democrat wins the presidential election next, he or she might remove the tariffs that are put in place. And he really pushed back against that. So I guess that's a way of me getting to a question just about the permanence of these tariffs and how fortified this wall the president's building is. Talk a bit, if you would, Brendan, just about the way that the president and his team have been testing the legality of these tariffs. They've settled on these 301 tariffs. Seems like they are less subject to legal scrutiny, more likely to stay in place, and what that means just about the overall trade policy regime the U.S. is going to have here going forward.
Yeah, I mean, to Lipsky's point, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, you're going to have to fund your programs in an environment, where the fiscal situation is deteriorating pretty rapidly and severely. And so, the tariffs are bringing in something like $100 billion a year by some estimates, and that's going to fund whether it's tax cuts or spending. You're going to need that, and if you're looking for places to cut, if you're looking for ways to generate revenue, you're not going to want to get rid of tariffs as long as the economy and consumers are absorbing them, and they have to a large extent so far. So the legality question is really one that we're going to see play out. We saw small businesses sue the administration immediately on Friday over these 301s. It depends on who you talk to. Trade lawyers will tell you, yeah, they're on pretty firm ground with these 301s. They've been tested in the past, but you can talk to others who would say, look, this forced labor 301 investigation is much broader than the intent of the statute, and so there's some vulnerability there. Perhaps how can you lump China in with Switzerland on the question of forced labor? So we're going to see a lot of lawsuits and a lot of uncertainty still, but that is pretty much the name of the game going forward. Is to just expect the unexpected, like we saw several times this week.
Christina, our spice company that we talked to,
that's right,
fighting this in court once again, pushing back on these tariffs.
We're victorious last time. We'll have to see. And maybe that's something, watchers of this are hoping will happen as well. But I did want to ask, you mentioned to me this week when you were talking to Jameson Greer and Aspen, because Brendan, you mentioned like these investigations, and I'm really stuck on this mechanism and how thorough they are, because you got to get through 60 some odd detailed cases. It seems pretty tedious. And then what did he say to you about that?
Well, I mean, he was going into detail just about how rigorous these investigations were. Brendan, this is something that I asked you about yesterday. I mean, we had 60 to 80 countries here in 90 pages. Talk a bit about that, the rigor, the diligence that the trade representative has done here or gone through here.
Yeah, so this is the forced labor tariffs. The USTR's office put out a report, a conclusion on its investigation, and it was 98 pages covering roughly 85 countries, including the European Union, the 27 from the European Union. So, you do the math, and it's that's like 1 page per country or 1.5 pages, and you got to wonder how thorough that is and how durable that's going to be under court challenges. Greer also said that this other case on excess capacity is much more complicated. It involves interdependent supply chains, and it's much more difficult to unravel. And he said, I think he told you, it's he's got dozens of lawyers working on this. The big unknown about that particular case, that 301 on excess capacity, is are they going to drop that before the summit between Trump and Xi in September? And there are folks that will tell you that they won't want to do that and potentially have the Chinese leader back away from that summit that President Trump really wants to happen. And so you start to mix sort of the geopolitical with the trade, the technical side of the trade portfolio at the White House, and you can see how it's going to get very difficult just from a technical aspect. There are only so many lawyers at USTR. It's not a gigantic agency. And the political side, if you really want to upset China, have them revive their rare earths weaponization, as a result of your new excess capacity tariffs. That's some big questions that the political folks and the trade attorneys in the White House are going to have to hash out over the next several weeks.
Brendan, great to talk to you 2 days in a row, no less. Brendan joining us there from London.
I'll try not to take it personally. You guys are talking without me. It's fine.
This is a moving target. We're going to stay in touch. Brendan, appreciate the time. Brendan Murray, our global trade editor. And Christina, it's fascinating how plastic all of this is and how fast moving
my other question is, okay, this is nominally done to adequately restrict imported goods made with forced labor. But is the U.S. track record on that any better than Switzerland? Any better than some of these countries that we are investigating?
I think you're going to hear a similar question from a lot of these nations as they go through this.
All right, up next, measles cases in the U.S. are already outpacing where they were last year, now a decade high. The reason for that surge and what can be done to stop it.
When news breaks,
a redhead across the Bloomberg terminal.
Bloomberg has you covered.
Trump's global tariffs are struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court.
For all the context and clarity you need.
There's going to be now tons of tariff headlines until midterm elections.
Hear it first on Bloomberg. Wednesday, the Fed decides.
Share wars just around the corner, setting the stage for a real debate. Is this meeting live or not?
Our number one objective is getting policy right. And if we get policy right, we can deliver lower prices.
Trust Bloomberg to bring you the fastest coverage and exclusive analysis.
The sum of this is real GDP and the inflation piled on top of it.
That's going to cause inflation that does come into consumer goods in other ways.
Tune in to Bloomberg Surveillance, the Fed decides, starting at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg.
Every weekday, Bloomberg puts the spotlight on a different aspect of global finance. Flows, funds, and the forces shaping markets on ETF IQ. The future of money with Bloomberg Crypto. The players behind major transactions on Bloomberg Deals. Rates, risk, and the cost of capital on Bloomberg Real Yield. And personal finance, retirement, and wealth management on Bloomberg Money. A different topic every weekday, only on Bloomberg Television.
Western countries, all of them are cutting funding to Africa. And some of these programs were supported by funding coming from Western countries, like for human resources, for testing, for transportation of samples. And suddenly, African countries have to think how to fund money and to cover this gap. But it takes some time. And I think the combination of all of these factors are fueling this mistrust that we see at community level. We value the support we got and we are still getting from the US. And we think that if we continue to work together, and there is no reason for the US not to work with Africa CDC, Africa CDC is the leader in terms of public health in Africa.
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories.
And we're here, where the action starts in Sydney.
And in Tokyo, get ahead as the global trading day begins.
The Asia Trade, weekdays only on Bloomberg.
In case you missed it on Bloomberg Surveillance.
We're journalists, we've got to ask, can this really continue at this rate?
What we see in our data is a consumer spending. If the consumers spend in America, that means the economy is okay, and that probably means the rest of the markets and the construct and the final demand is there.
What are the potential thresholds that could potentially stymie some of the pipeline?
People are borrowing because they see opportunity, whether it's equipment buying, whether it's hiring, whether it's building a plant, whether it's inventory buildup.
Don't miss Bloomberg Surveillance, live every weekday.
The countdown is on. Everything you need to get the edge at the end of the market day. Get ahead of tomorrow's trading with The Close. Weekdays on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
In case you missed it on the opening trade.
The history of technology has not been more leisure, right? We all have dishwashers at home, but we don't spend less time in the kitchen. So my thesis is that there's aggregate job opportunity. Ramp does enterprise payments, expenses. Revelo looks at labor market data, and they actually find companies that spend more on AI are hiring more. So that the data shows about 6 to 12 month lag, but 10% more workers. There's an interesting story there.
There's a lot of churn in the labour market, but then maybe not lower employment.
Absolutely. I think there will be shifts, right? And we can't get away from that. But in aggregate, I think there's more opportunity. I think we're going to be doing more types of work, and there's a lot of latent work that's just not happening.
And you still need to hire the young people. Is that also the message today?
Absolutely.
Tunde has views on this.
I mean, Revelo's analysis said they were hiring more young people. So 10% overall, 12% more young people.
Don't miss the opening trade, live every weekday.
At 9:30 a.m., the market tells you what it's really thinking.
We beat the drum to the opening bell.
With deep analysis of the forces driving the price action.
Focusing investors on what really matters.
Where the money flows, which markets are changing.
Conversations with players shaping the narrative.
Innovative growth companies gravitate to NASDAQ.
It's not just like, let's buy the Mag 7 or AI.
That's a really compelling story.
This is where your trading day begins.
And this is Open Interest.
Only on Bloomberg.
Thank you for joining us on Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Lisa Mateo. Let's update you on today's top stories. And this, President Donald Trump has a response to the outbreak of cyclospora linked to contaminated iceberg lettuce that was imported from Mexico.
I think what we're going to do is we're going to put a major tariff on Mexico because of the lettuce. And we're going to put a big tariff on Canada because of the smoke. All right? We'll get a comment. Which would you have, the lettuce or the smoke?
Well, speaking with reporters at the White House yesterday, Trump said he would rather take the smoke. Meanwhile, cyclospora outbreak has now spread to 4 more states. And the Wall Street Journal says representatives for produce giant Taylor Farms has contacted the White House to try and delay the recall. Now, the company is asking for more proof and more time before being linked to that foodborne illness. Now, meanwhile, Taco Bell's lettuce-free burrito, will it help the company recover after a parasite scare? Data compiled by Bloomberg's Second Measure, it shows an improvement in transactions when the restaurant chain began selling the $1 enchiritos. Now, traffic to the company's U.S. location has taken a hit since authorities, did tie that cyclospore infection to shredded lettuce that was supplied by Taylor Farms, sold at Taco Bell's in several states. And in sports, LeBron James headed to Philly, ending an 8-year run with the Los Angeles Lakers. The NBA star announces plans to join the Philadelphia 76ers on social media, saying that his decision, it wasn't based on money or family, but rather the desire to compete and win another championship. Now, ESPN says James will sign a 2-year, $8 million deal with a player option. So he's leaving Bronny. He's leaving his son.
Yeah, this is big news in my household. I got one son at summer camp, sleepaway, another one back home. He's written a letter as a result of this to spread the news to those camp goers. This is apparently meets the threshold, but it's what 24th season.
That's adorably analog.
Yes, very analog.
I like sleepaway camp. Can we go to sleepaway camp, adults?
I would love to do it.
Unplug, go in the woods. Sounds great. All right, thanks, Lisa. In less cheerful news, an alarming statistics from the CDC. On Friday, the number of measles cases this year in the United States hit 2,318. That's higher than all of last year and is now the most infections since 1991.
For more, we're joined by Dr. Amish Adalja. He's an infectious disease expert and senior scholar at Johns Hopkins University Center for Health Security. Dr. Adalja, great to have you with us once again. And let me just start by asking about how we got to this place. And I guess a natural follow-on to that is, what would the U.S. need to do to kind of get beyond this or get back to the way things were? How far is the cat out of the bag?
When you think about outbreaks, sometimes it's hard to understand how things got started. How do you got to the status quo? With measles, it's really a no-brainer. We got there because vaccination rates fell below the herd immunity threshold. And we're talking about what is the most contagious infectious disease that we humans face, one that requires a high level of immunity in the population, and one in which it's circulating in many parts of the world. So all it took was for us to lower our armor, to lower our force field, and then measles came back. It never went away. And the solution is equally simple. It's just to get more vaccine into the arms of people who are unvaccinated, and then this problem will disappear.
David and I have a selfish question. When we were putting this in the lineup yesterday, we've had MMRs as kids. Are we protected? People who had the usual vaccine course as children, does that take you through adulthood? Or at some point, if you're in one of these places with high infection rates, do you need some sort of booster?
For the vast majority of people, the standard 2-dose childhood vaccination schedule will protect them for life. That doesn't mean that the vaccine is 100%, but it's pushing up, above 95%. So there's no generalized recommendation for boosters that are needed for the population. It's really about people who've had 0 doses of measles. That's what's driving this.
In your line of work, a lot of what you deal with is kind of communication about the need for vaccination going forward. And I'm curious at this moment when it seems like there are government officials who are not promoting them or not advocating for them. Maybe it's incumbent more on public health practitioners like yourself to push for that. What is the messaging campaign like? In other words, how do you assess the way in which public health professionals are making the case for vaccines at a time when they seem more necessary than ever?
And what kind of campaigns have been effective? Have you seen any that have worked?
So I think it depends upon why someone is not vaccinated. There may be people who haven't gotten around to getting their children vaccinated. There may be people who have questions about vaccines. So you kind of have to take a different tack depending upon where someone is. And often it's very different to do it kind of as a one-size-fits-all message on television by a talking head versus a provider sitting in front of a patient or a patient's family and asking, what questions do you have about measles? And I think that's the better way to do it. We know that people will move towards vaccination if they can get their answers, get answers to the questions that they have in a non-judgmental way. That's a very different type of rhetoric when you're dealing with the likes of RFK Jr., who is spreading disinformation, where you just have to basically call him out for spreading lies. So it's very kind of nuanced and very personalized, and that's what works. We know that parents trust family doctors, they trust their primary care providers. That's where the actual movement occurs, not so much when someone's on, blasting from a megaphone about the vaccine.
I think we talked about this last time you were on here, but it seems pretty much a fait accompli now that the U.S. is going to lose its measles elimination status. There was this hearing. The U.S. requested that it be pushed back until the fall. So now that decision won't come down until fall. But at this point, can you see any way that doesn't happen given the case rates in the U.S.?
No, I think that the United States has effectively lost its elimination status. And even if by some technicality it maintains its elimination status, the deeper question is, does the United States have resiliency against measles? The answer is no, irrespective of what the elimination status decision is. And there will be politics around the elimination decision. So I think it's just, for all intents and purposes, the U.S. does not have the ability to control measles any longer.
On the issue of control, I'm curious how that dovetails with kind of economic considerations. So when you look at where these outbreaks are, I saw there's one in Teton County in Wyoming, for instance. When you start to see an outbreak like this, so much work has to be done to track down who's been exposed to it, get the word out, obviously mount a vaccination campaign as well. Could you talk a bit about the economic consequences of having a resurgence in a disease like measles in the way in which we're seeing here in the U.S.?
So anytime there's an infectious disease, it will lead to disruption. People can't go about their activities of daily life, which means if it's a child with measles, that child can't go to school, that child's parents might have to stay home, that child's parents might have to hire someone to babysit, and then you have a health department that then has to go and investigate who was the person in touch with. Do they need to contact people? Do they need to do any kind of countermeasures to stop the measles from spreading in a given community? All of that costs money, and it's money that doesn't need to be spent because these measles cases are happening voluntarily by people's choices. This is not some force of nature. This is people's choice to not vaccinate their children, and then it has economic consequences that don't need to be incurred. And I think that's another important point to make with infectious diseases, is that they keep humans from flourishing because they're stuck in bed sick and they're not out there producing, they're out there innovating, and you're taking money that could be used for some other other concern, and now it's being put back to something. It's put into something that we shouldn't have to be putting money into when we've had a solution to this since the 1960s.
Doc, before we let you go, we want to ask you about the other thing a lot of Americans are worried about, and that's this cyclospora going around with this, possibly this tainted lettuce. It seems like, did the government react fast enough? And is this a larger concern about food safety and oversight in the U.S.?
So I do think it was more of a reaction from the government. I think state governments did very well, namely Michigan, which got hit very, very hard. But you have to remember that the CDC basically got decimated in this administration in terms of cuts to its budget, whole divisions that were eliminated, including the division that would have been responsible for cyclospora. So there's less people doing this. So when you're thinking about a foodborne outbreak, it's time and speed to identify what the vehicle is that's spreading something. If you've got less people around to crunch the data, to do the interviews with people who are case patients, it's going to take longer. And the state departments have done well, but they are also underfunded, chronically underfunded, understaffed. So it is something that decreases the overall resiliency to foodborne illnesses when you don't have a robust system in place or when that system is being actively dismantled.
All right, Dr. Adalja from Johns Hopkins University Center for Health Security, thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it. And I think a story here as well is the way that the CDC was monitoring for these kinds of parasites. I've seen reported that they kind of scaled back the ones that they were monitoring for regularly. Cyclospora was one that was
this
no
one
longer
specifically,
being checked for. And so now we're in a moment where clearly it's had this profound impact, yes, in Michigan, but across the country. Were they able to get ahead of it? No, in likelihood, because they weren't just monitoring the way in which they had.
But it seems like, this is a constant battle that you hear from public health officials, whether it's Ebola or COVID. When those diseases get under control, it seems hard to justify to governments that they still need that money. It gets pulled back, and this is how you end up where you are.
See if that changes. All right, coming up here, Tesla is struggling after a disappointing quarterly earnings report and lagging EV sales. So what will become of the Cybertruck, which Elon Musk called Tesla's best product ever made?
And you can explore live streaming news and interviews all on our Bloomberg TV shows, documentaries, reporter analysis, and more in one place. Check it out, Bloomberg.com/video.
What was it like starting all over again? One day you're in a big company with a big parent, and then you have to start all over again.
You know, it was really exciting and invigorating. I felt like a young kid again when I started Jones Road. And right before we launched, I definitely had a sudden emotion of saying, uh-oh, what if I'm a one-hit wonder? I was a little scared, but then I just threw it up into the wind and went for it.
Jones Road, where'd that name come from?
Well, I sold the rights to Bobby Brown to Estee Lauder when we sold the company, so I couldn't use it again. So we needed a name because I wanted to launch Jones Road the day my 25-year non-compete was up. I needed a name, and I didn't have one. And I was driving to the Hamptons with my husband. My head was down on Waze, and I looked down, I saw Jones Road, and I said, Jones Road Beauty. He said, I like it. And that's how it became Jones Road.
The global economic playbook is being rewritten, and the levers of power are moving in real time.
To see where the world is headed, you have to look where the action is.
I'm Haslinda Amin in Singapore.
I'm Menika Doshi in Mumbai.
Welcome to Emerging the New Economy podcast.
Each month, we dive deep into how the world's most exciting rising economies are shaping the global future.
Join the conversation. Subscribe to Emerging on your favorite podcast platform today.
In case you missed it on the close.
You're entering into Mexico, your first store there, a big one out there in the Monterrey region. Why do you think you can make that work?
We believe Mexico is a really important milestone for our great brand as we continue to lean into our global strategy. It's an important country for us. We recognize and admire the culinary heritage.
There's a little bit of irony when it comes to the fact that Chipotle Mexican Grill is opening up, expanding into Mexico. And with that in mind, what changes do you have planned for Mexico?
We'll locally source as much of the product we bring over the border today as it relates to avocados and tomatoes and peppers, but it'll be the same menu we've launched in Western Europe, the same menu we launched in the Middle East with our partner Alshaya, and the brand really resonates well when we deliver on standard the same execution and same menu that we have in the United States.
Don't miss The Close live every weekday.
Earnings season is here.
The earnings story has been so powerful.
Bloomberg is first to break the numbers.
Blackstone reporting a larger than expected jump.
All right, guys, I want to go to T-Mobile.
We're keeping an eye on those earnings out of Oracle.
Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, Google.
With the smartest insights.
We have seen a consumer that has been and continues to be resilient.
There's a lot of reason to believe that there's still a huge amount of growth here.
Continuing coverage on Bloomberg.
Welcome back to Bloomberg This Weekend. David Gura here with Christina, Ruffini, and something we're going to talk about here in a minute is the Teslas, Ford vehicles. Tesla had some bad earnings this week, I just want to point out. But this was a fascinating piece that we saw in the Bloomberg terminal involving the way that Tesla's Cybertruck, are you a fan?
No comment.
Would you drive one?
Absolutely not.
Would not drive one. I would think I'd find it difficult to drive. Anyways, that it may be kind of the legacy, the heir apparent to the Ford Edsel, which I actually have never seen on the road.
I haven't either, but I've I know it from like a butt of jokes that like your parents or grandparents would make. And in the article, our colleague Keith Naughton kind of goes into the reasons it was so controversial. It had this vertical grille in the front.
Very futuristic looking.
Disrupting the way cars were made and looked. But it was also about the way the car functioned. They kind of got ahead of their skis with some of the features. It had a push shift switch, which was on the steering wheel, so people would try to honk the horn and accidentally throw their car into a different gear.
Yes.
So that didn't help the upsell. But he compares it to kind of the Tesla and how it was one of the biggest duds for Ford, and the Cybertruck could be one of the biggest duds.
As we tee up Lisa Mateo doing our BTWs, this is one of my must-reads of the week. I mean, it was fascinating because you look at that Edsel, it was supposed to sell like tens and tens of thousands of cars.
They thought it was going to be their best-selling.
It's going to be a huge thing. Sold like 9,000, I think, total. And we look at the Cybertruck, again, Elon Musk, much ballyhooed. This is going to be the truck of the future. Lo and behold, it seems like Elon Musk's companies are buying a lot of these for like general transportation around.
Oh, interesting.
Starbase and other properties, but they've not caught on.
I'm surprised how many I've seen in the city, both in D.C., which I guess made sense given the politics of owning a Tesla, which has also changed since the Cybertruck launch. But I see quite a few of them in Manhattan. There's some around here. So
I would not want to park one here in New York City.
It seems like a very difficult car to drive in the city.
I've done a fake BTW there. Let's get to the real BTW here with Lisa Mateo.
Let's go to the queen herself. BT Dubs.
She's been reading more deeply than I have. I mean, again, great story by Keith Naughton. I know you've got more, Lisa.
Yeah, I do. But I've seen those Cybertrucks trying to park in parking spots.
Yeah?
And you're right. It is pretty scary to see them trying to pull in there. All right. So let's start with this. Okay. So Play-Doh isn't just for kids anymore. Remember it as a kid? You used to play with it?
I used to eat it.
Okay. That explains a lot.
Did you really?
Of course. It's quite salty.
Am I the only one who didn't eat Play-Doh?
Oh,
all right.
God.
I did not. I did not know that was a thing. Okay. So
high carb load there.
Here's the headline for you. Okay. So Hasbro, it plants Play-Doh growth seed with Blooms. Okay, so basically what Blooms is, it's this new line that's geared toward adults, right? So it's flower arrangements. You can make flowers from the Play-Doh. They're hoping it can catapult their growth. It's a $1.5 billion arts and crafts category. But I wanted you to listen to the Hasbro CEO. His name is Christian Cox, and he spoke on open interest about it. Listen to this.
Okay.
I think that build and display dynamic, that play being more than just something for kids, collection being more than something for just nerds like myself, but much broader, I think that's powering the entire play industry right now, and is a power trend that I don't think is going to go away anytime soon.
Industry.
Yeah, so you hear we talked about collection, so think like trading cards, okay? So Bloomberg is saying that Blooms may not be as big of a growth as trading cards, but they do see it kind of, it could help, but it's a smaller category, so it's going to be tough. I don't know, do adults really want to do the Play-Doh thing?
Well, they love coloring, apparently. Adults like to relieve their stress by coloring.
I feel like this is trying to compete with the Lego flower arrangements that you can buy and build, but those are like permanent, right? You put them together and they're not going to wilt or melt. I'm assuming you're not baking this Play-Doh. It's just like you can go smush it. If someone runs into it, you're going to wreck your flower.
I mean, and it's going everywhere. It's at Target. It's at Walmart. It's even on TikTok Shop. Like, it's everywhere.
All right, Lisa, you bring us Play-Doh and we will reevaluate our answer.
I should say those Lego flowers not edible.
No, they are not edible. Please.
Anything's edible if you try hard enough, David.
All right. What else you got, Lisa?
Okay. Are you pickleball fans? Do you guys play? No. Have you tried?
I have played once for a story.
Okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I've never played.
Well, there's something new, guys.
It's very popular.
Forget pickleball. Move over. It is paddle.
Paddle.
Okay. Yes. Wall Street Journal says inside the push to make paddle the next pickleball. So they share a lot of elements sports with squash and tennis, played mostly in doubles. This is what paddle is. So it's the rackets have holes, not string. The balls look like tennis balls, but not like the wiffle ball, like how you have in pickleball and you hear the plink, plink, plink.
Oh, is that
back
what's
and
different?
forth.
I was like, this looks the same. What is different?
And the court is a little bit bigger than the pickleball court. It's surrounded too by walls made of glass panels and mesh, so it's a little bit different than pickleball. But this is becoming huge. Like there are members who pay
all over the city.
A lot of money. Yes.
And it seems I've heard it's very expensive. Not that that's been my barrier to entry.
No, but I think there's one of these in
yeah.
Central Park now. I can't remember if I think it's paddle. The whole, like where the ice rink is normally. It's either pickleball or paddle, but there's people out there.
I've seen one in Dumbo, in Brooklyn.
Yeah, if it has the walls
big,
around it, it's the paddle. So that's how
no,
you
it doesn't. Okay, so it must be, well.
We haven't asked you if you've played pickleball, Lisa.
I do not. No, I'm not pickleball, not tennis. I've tried, failed miserably. So let's move on to this one. Okay, Washington's Union Square. Okay, Christina, I know you've been there a ton of different times. Have you ever seen a little pig there? Okay.
What?
This is at Union Station?
A mini pig. Yes, Union Station. Yes, sorry, not Union Square, Union Station. Okay, so this little pig, isn't he the cutest thing? This is from the Washington Post. A mini pig has a big job. His name is Synergy, okay? He's just over 5 pounds,
so
7 months old.
Synergy the pig.
Yes, it belongs to the founder of the H3 project, which is like a crisis intervention program. So this little pig goes into Union Station and walks around, and it helps them get clients, right? Because if you see a cute little pig, you're going to be more than willing to go up and say like, "Oh, open up," because sometimes it's hard for them to get clients. So this little pig is like the hottest thing in the train station right now.
The hottest thing in the train station.
It is the cutest little thing.
All right, I am going through this train station next week with my tiny dog Brutus.
Yes.
I think
they would be best friends.
Look for that pig.
If they meet, I will report back. I don't know how Brutus is going to feel about a tiny pig, but that's what we got.
Lisa Mateo, thank you very much. BTW, I'll get to say that. BTW this week. How about that pig? For our radio listeners, it had a little beard, it looked like.
It was very cute. They don't stay mini. They get bigger.
Yeah, we all do. All right, we're coming up on 8 a.m. in New York City.
The next hour of Bloomberg This Weekend starts right now. Coming up on Bloomberg This Weekend, a White House Correspondents Dinner redo.
It's great to be back at a place that I know very well because I built it. As I said 3 months ago, the show must go on.
President Trump takes the stage again at the annual dinner 3 months after a gunman stormed security lines at the Washington Hilton. His comments on the war with Iran and crucial midterm elections.
Splash landing. SpaceX launches its massive Starship rocket in the first test flight since going public. Will this help boost the company's shares?
And new this morning, an exclusive interview with Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang. His push for more inclusive AI and what he's saying about the growing competition from China.
They're producing more AI researchers than probably all of the world has, in any given year. If manufacturing intelligence is important, they manufacture the most important version of it, which is the researchers.
Well, welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend. It is 8 a.m. in New York City from Bloomberg's World Headquarters. I'm David Gura.
I'm Christina Ruffini. We're here with Lisa Mateo, bringing you the latest breaking news reports, analysis, and live reporting this morning and every weekend from 7 to 10 a.m. We've been talking about the White House Correspondents Dinner, Part 2, that took place last night. Also, what's going on in the Strait and how that story has now kind of turned to the Red Sea as we're seeing potential attacks from the Houthis on ships there as well, and maybe against Saudi Arabia.
Eager to talk to Jeff Mason once again, but there was a fascinating piece in the Washington Post this morning about the way that the president continues to talk about diplomacy as the solution here, that more often than not, when he addresses the war, he talks about how talks are continuing, and it seems like there was no real indication that that is in fact what's happening here. As we've seen, yes, a break in U.S. strikes overnight on Friday night going into Saturday, but there have been 13 straight days of the U.S. striking targets in Iran.
That's right, and now we have the specter of this new nuclear deal that the U.S. might strike with Saudi Arabia, but there's a catch there.
There's a big caveat.
And we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah,
all right, but first we're going to go to Lisa Mateo with the headlines.
You got it. Let's get to that part 2 you were talking about. Last night, President Trump headlined a scaled-down White House Correspondents' Dinner 3 months after the original event was cut short by a gunman. Now, he criticized several reporters by name while also saying he had respect for journalism in the press. He also spoke about the war in Iran. It was Trump's first time speaking at the annual event, which he did not attend during his first term. Now, before attending the dinner, President Trump hosted the leaders of 4 advanced nuclear reactor companies at the White House to commend their technology hitting a milestone. Trump sees nuclear reactors as a key source of power for data centers and economic growth. While he was there, the president took questions from reporters on Saudi Arabia's nuclear deal.
In order to do it, they have to be a member of the Abraham Accords, which have been very successful. But it's time now that they do it. They and others didn't want to do it because of the problem that they had with Iran. You don't have that problem anymore.
Now, speaking of Iran, meanwhile, the Houthis now claim to have struck southern Saudi Arabia with missiles on the Red Sea coast. It comes after Saudi-led coalition forces in Yemen, while it carried out a military operation against Houthi military targets. That was near a port in the southern Red Sea. The escalation, it compounds an already severe squeeze on regional energy flows. The U.S. military did not announce any strikes on Iran overnight, and Iranian media did not report any Islamic Republic strikes on U.S. bases. The Trump administration facing a fresh legal challenge to the president's latest round of global tariffs that took effect Friday. Small businesses, well, they filed lawsuits in the U.S. Court of International Trade accusing President Trump and U.S. officials of unlawfully using Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 to replace earlier tariffs that were struck down by the Supreme Court. The Trump administration announced Thursday that the U.S. will collect duties of between 10% and 12.5% on imports from most major trading partners. And meanwhile, Peter Navarro, senior advisor to President Trump on trade and manufacturing, is defending the administration's tariff strategy, saying that persistent trade deficits are the result of what he called foreign countries, quote, cheating. He spoke with Bloomberg's Joe Matthew on Balance of Power.
If you go to the textbooks in trade, you're not supposed to have chronic balance of payments deficits. I mean, you're just not. Things are supposed to adjust. But the reason why that happens is because they cheat.
Navarro says that Europe's digital tax, it serves as an example of unfair treatment of U.S. companies. David and Christina.
It'll be interesting to see how all this plays out. I mentioned we had Brendan Murray on a little while ago, this spice company that fought
Back
those
to court.
first tariffs, now fighting these again, and I think it'd be fun to catch up with them once again to see sort of what the argument they're making is. But yeah, Brendan Murray telling me yesterday, likely to see a lot of court challenges here, but unclear sort of how much success they're going to have relative to the ones that we've seen in the past.
But it does seem, as Brendan was saying, that at this point, these economies, these markets are factoring in there's going to be at least probably some sort of 10% tariff.
Some floor there of 10.
They need some sort of predictability to just go forward with that in mind. And if something happens in the courts, so be it.
We'll see.
All right. Thanks, Lisa.
All right. Prior to last night's White House Correspondents Dinner, President Trump was in the Oval Office saying the U.S. is locked and loaded, his words, prepared to launch a major attack on Iran.
Follow up on Iran. Have you made a decision about the major strikes that you were referring to? Okay. Should we expect to see major strikes?
Look, we're talking to them right now. I think they're getting more and more serious as the days go by, for maybe the obvious reason. But we are talking to them right now. Look, there are two ways. I consider that the smarter way, but the other is probably the easier way, doing what we're doing. And we can take that to a much higher level if we want to. You know, we're prepared to do that, as you know. We're locked and loaded. We're locked and loaded and ready to go, but we're talking to them. So I think while we're talking, we'll see what comes of it.
And when you say, just
I believe, Jeff, they're very serious. Okay. They should be.
And when you say that you're talking, is it Mr. Kushner or Mr. Witkoff, or who's involved in those talks?
Sort of everybody. JD and Marco and a lot of people are talking to, a lot of people to talk to. It's a big deal. But really, when you get right down to it, it's not very complex. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. You know, very, very simple, actually. But it's a big deal. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. If they have even a thought of a nuclear weapon, we will just continue to go at much higher levels. But we are talking right now, and we'll see what comes of it. I'm not, you know, despite what everyone says about the election, I'm not in a hurry.
A lot of people to talk to, the president says, and talking to the president was our own White House correspondent Jeff Mason, who joins us now following that dinner on very little sleep. For our TV viewers, yes, you did see Jeff there in the Oval in that scrum of reporters. Jeff, we were talking as we came on the air today about this is the first time in almost 2 weeks that Iran and the U.S. have not exchanged, as far as we know yet this morning, any munitions or attacks overnight. Should we read anything into that, or is this just a pause as the White House tries to recalibrate?
I mean, it's hard to know because they certainly have done a bit of recalibration over the last several weeks, as we know, and after the MOU was thrown out and strikes started again, it seemed like escalation was the top of the agenda. But that answer that he gave me in the Oval Office yesterday seemed to foreshadow that he was maybe ready for a little pause. And the fact that there weren't strikes overnight, again, seemed to confirm that that what he said was actually what he intended, which is to pull back a little bit while talks apparently are happening. We don't have a whole lot of details about those talks, and that's one reason I followed up by asking who's leading them, because we know that Jared Kushner and J.D. Vance, of course, at one point were involved, but he said he named those names again as being involved now, and I guess we'll just see where that goes.
I mentioned this piece in the Post this morning at the top of the show. Michael Birnbaum, who covers the White House for the Post, whom I know you know, writes, 6 times during that 38-minute Oval Office appearance on Friday, the president mentioned that his envoys were talking to Iran. Mike Birnbaum continues, the rhetorical emphasis on diplomacy followed days in which he suggested that he was ready to increase military pressure on the Middle Eastern country. Talk about that dynamic, if you would, Jeff. The way that we're hearing one thing from the president, yet all the while indications seem to be that he is fully considering ramping up military pressure on the country. There was that conversation that he had with Axios a little bit earlier in the week in which he talked about how he hadn't made a decision yet, but he was leaning toward more military action. The way that he's viewing the diplomatic path going forward here, as all the while he's talking about increasing military might.
It's kind of emblematic of how he's handled this war from the very beginning. He wants to have both. He wants to be able to say, I've got victory. I've done something that no other president has done. I've taken on Iran. We're preventing them from having a nuclear weapon. But he also has mused openly about being concerned of being a president who would preside over another Great Depression. And that's a reference to the economic impacts of this war, which, of course, Americans across the country are seeing with high fuel prices, which are directly related to the Strait of Hormuz not getting the kind of oil traffic through that it was before this whole conflict began. So I think, David, both things can be true. He is prepared for another big strike if he needs to, and of course he's the one who will make that determination of need, but is also really from the very beginning been open to off ramps if he feels like the United States is being taken seriously by the Republic of Iran, and I think that played out yesterday. But it was yesterday was sort of a microcosm of that, because you're right to mention what he said to Axios as being preparing for a big, massive strike, and then what he said to me, which was, we're talking, and let's kind of wait and see how that plays out before I make a decision about that strike. It's a lot of information, and some of it is often very contradictory.
Jeff, before we let you go, I do want to ask you about this announcement that the U.S. is potentially entering into an agreement to help build a nuclear reactor in Saudi Arabia. Now, before we dig into the details of that deal, I want to play you some sound from the president talking about Saudi Arabia and the Abraham Accords, which is normalization of diplomatic relations with Israel.
In order to do it, they have to be a member of the Abraham Accords, which have been very successful. But it's time now that they do it. They and others didn't want to do it because of the problem that they had with Iran. You don't have that problem anymore. You don't have a great power there anymore. You have a problem, but the problem is disappearing day by day. They were the bully of the Middle East. They were not going to be that much of a bully anymore.
The issue with this agreement, as I understand it, is it would allow Saudi to control and manufacture its own nuclear fuel. The U.S. has a deal with the UAE that doesn't allow that. It's considered the gold standard. It has inspections, and the fuel is handled other places. Why does Saudi Arabia, a very oil-rich nation, suddenly want a nuclear power plant? Does this seem about something else? And also, the U.S. has said this can't happen until Saudi normalizes relations with Israel. That is nowhere near close because the Saudi Crown Prince has said that can't happen until the situation in Gaza has handled. So is this really anything?
Yeah, let's dig into that second question. The deal was more or less done and signed when the president came out with his Truth Social post saying that this is all dependent on Saudi Arabia signing up to the Abraham Accords, which they have made clear that they don't want to do. So he essentially undermined the entire process, the entire deal, which may have been a reaction to some of the criticism that you were referencing about what U.S. was agreeing to with Saudi Arabia. But that's what we were asking him, or that's what he was being asked about in the Oval Office yesterday. Why did you do this? And even Caroline Leavitt, his spokeswoman, on Thursday was asked about it after that Truth Social post came out. And she said, this was always known, but it didn't appear to have been known before that deal was agreed to by both parties and even by his own administration. He clearly had a new thought about it, and that basically undermined the whole deal.
All right. Jeff Mason, Bloomberg White House correspondent, thank you so much for getting up. Please go take a nap. We really appreciate you.
My pleasure.
I want to dig into that last issue a bit more here with somebody who's a renowned expert here on nuclear security and non-proliferation issues. That is the Vice President for Studies at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, Corey Henderstein, who joins us now. Corey, let me ask you first of all just about the moment that we're in, and Jeff was alluding to it, the way that this could be kind of transformative to the Saudi economy, but a lot of questions about why this is indeed happening now. How are you processing this conversation that's taking place about the White House's willingness to help facilitate this in Saudi Arabia, and indeed what it could mean for, yes, the Middle East, but the world more broadly?
Thank you for having me this morning. This is a really interesting question because the Saudis have been pursuing nuclear energy for years. It comes from a couple of different approaches. One, they have some uranium deposits, although they may prove to be maybe less fruitful than they had hoped at one point. Any energy that they use domestically could free up oil that they could sell internationally, and the economics of that may be good. They're also probably interested in creating options for nuclear weapons in the future. It doesn't mean that they've made a decision to build a nuclear weapon, but Saudi leaders at multiple levels have said that they want the possibility to pursue a nuclear weapon if, for example, Iran was to acquire one.
That seems like the key issue because Saudi, again, not hurting for energy. And also, if they really wanted a civilian nuclear program, they could have had one years ago. They've put out bids. My understanding is previously they've talked to China, Russia. They've investigated this before. Is there a reasonable non-military explanation for not making the same fuel restrictions on the Saudi deal that the U.S. did when it made its deal with the UAE in 2009?
Well, obviously, geopolitics are playing here. The United States wants to be Saudi's nuclear partner, as opposed to China or Russia. And in order to do that, we have historically asked for constraints on those programs that China and Russia don't ask for. So the real question here is, which is more important, that the U.S. industry and strategic partnership be engaged with Saudi and at the expense of Russia and China, or that we hold to some of these core non-proliferation principles. Now, I come from the non-proliferation community. Of course, I'm really committed to these non-proliferation principles. But there are some interesting creative ways that previous administrations, the first Trump administration, the Biden administration, and the current Trump administration have looked at to say, are there ways we can get what we want and also give a little bit? And on the domestic enrichment, the issue that you've noted, what they seem to have said is, we will engage in a conversation about it, so we don't cut it off. But there has to be a later decision point, so there's a gate that has to go through related to economics. And then if we pass that gate, then yes, potentially there would be enrichment in Saudi Arabia, but it would be U.S. technology under U.S. control in some sort of black box arrangement. That's creative. I don't know if it can really happen, but I think it's kind of better than the alternative of opening the space for Russia and China, and certainly better than Saudi Arabia getting fed up and just pursuing a domestic program themselves.
That's interesting.
Corey, let me lean into a chain reaction metaphor here, obviously so integral to nuclear energy, but also when it comes to policies surrounding it. Our colleague Mark Champion, who covers foreign affairs for Bloomberg Opinion, wrote a column about this, and he said, this is a problem that's been kind of solving a tactical problem here, but could really spread more widely. He said, if the U.S. is allowed to bend nuclear non-proliferation rules for Saudi Arabia, then why not for Egypt? Egypt, Turkey, South Korea, or Japan? And if that's okay for U.S. allies, then why not for Russian and Chinese ones also? Talk a bit about that, the way that we're seeing this play out here in somewhat of a vacuum, but the way that you're thinking through what a carve-out like this, an exception like this, going down this path might mean for non-proliferation more broadly.
It's a really important question, and I think one that's loaded with a lot of misunderstandings about history. For example, we do talk about the gold standard in the context of the United Arab Emirates and what they have agreed to and what they've accepted as far as constraints on their program. But those were not imposed on the UAE. Those were initiated by the UAE. And what we've seen is Japan does have a different rule than Korea, and that creates problems in the relationships with our East Asian allies. We do have different rules with different countries. We do have a case-by-case basis. Now, there are certain foundational elements that we seek, but for example, we have not required the no enrichment and no reprocessing commitment from other countries, even since the UAE agreed to it. It's ideal. But sometimes we're not living in a perfect world. And when we're thinking about the relationship that nuclear energy can create, a multi-generational, multi-decadal, ongoing engagement with the United States, sometimes that leverage may be worth more than some other things that we have to give up.
I also wonder, when you look at, let's say, who started Iran's nuclear program, the phrase atoms for peace comes to mind. If there's enough consideration about, yes, this administration, this regime in Saudi is nominally friendly towards the United States, but that doesn't mean what comes down the line in 5-10 years is going to be. And it seems to me the U.S. fails to learn this lesson time and time again. We arm the Mujahideen, that goes to the, goes into the Taliban. The weapons that we left with the Shah went against us, in Iran. Is there a fear that should this regime change and no longer be friendly to the United States, they would have armed a country that could be an antagonist to America?
This is a really important point. I mean, these systems, these facilities, a nuclear power plant, a uranium enrichment plant, if one day they were to pursue that down the road, these are not things that can just be turned off. But there are things that we could do to constrain capability, but it's not a guarantee. And you're right that we haven't learned that lesson in all cases. There's another area where we may be repeating the problems of the past, and that's with our own civil nuclear program and how we're seeing about pursuing that going forward and looking at the use of some materials, including plutonium, that could have this dual use, being possible fuel for nuclear energy and fuel for a nuclear weapon. In the past, we spread highly enriched uranium all over the world because we thought these research reactors fueled by HEU were great, collaborative projects. And then we've spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars collecting that HEU back to the United States. I don't want us to see us doing the same thing with plutonium.
Let's end here with the announcement the president made yesterday, this event that he had in the Oval Office, the announcement that there's going to be more kind of civilian nuclear power efforts here in the U.S. They're going to be happening kind of pioneered by or prompted by the private sector here. How do you greet that? It does seem like there increasingly is a conversation in this country that there's inevitability to there being more nuclear energy in the U.S. A good thing as you see it, not to be too blunt in my questioning, but are we at a point at which it does seem like this is a path that the U.S. has to go down in light of the demands that we're seeing placed on the energy grid?
In my personal opinion, I think that nuclear energy and the expansion of civil nuclear energy is actually a good thing, especially domestically. But there are ways to do it right, and there are ways to do it wrong. And exactly in the point we were just talking, let's learn our lessons. Let's think about the proliferation sensitivity of the materials we put into that ecosystem and into that supply chain. Let's think about the verification and monitoring that we can help the International Atomic Energy Agency build so that we have warning if things were to go into a non-civilian pathway. And let's use civil nuclear energy as both a partnership point and a pursuit of clean energy, lower carbon future, and energy security.
Corey Henderson, always lovely to see you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Now we're going to go to Lisa Mateo for the headlines.
You got it. And let's get right to it, guys. We're starting with a big win for one of India's largest student movements. That's in years. The country's education minister has resigned after protests over exam paper leaks. Now, analysts say that it shows that the government is finally taking accountability and responsibility for the leaks that impact millions of youth. Protesters have since ended their demonstrations. The race to replace former Senate candidate Graham Plattner will come to an end today at the main Democratic Party nominating convention in Bangor. Now, Democrats, they are expected to elevate Troy Jackson as their party's nominee in the showdown with longtime Republican Senator Susan Collins. Meanwhile, the Democratic National Committee, it has approved a new primary election calendar, putting South Carolina first. It'll be held on January 22nd, 2028, followed by Nevada and New Hampshire, New Mexico, Michigan, and Virginia. Well, they will round out the first 6 contests prior to Super Tuesday. And in company news, Alphabet's Waymo looking to exit its partnership with Uber. The Financial Times says the self-driving car company has held internal talks about ending its current deals with ride-hailing group. And the two companies, they first partnered in 2023, but have become direct competitors in some markets. There's also an intense lobbying battle over the future of robotaxis. And stage 20 of the 2026 Tour de France brings one final brutal day in the mountains today. 3 enormous climbs, almost nowhere to recover. It's one last opportunity for the Tour's best climbers to attack before tomorrow's finale in Paris. I couldn't even imagine tackling that.
No, nor I. I will say, sorry, I've missed this whole race, and it's funny, in years past,
Yes, I feel like
I
we
was
usually
very
hear
glued to the
about
tour.
it.
I would watch it. Yes, going back to the Lance Armstrong
Maybe the
days
World
or
Cup
whatever.
kind of eclipsed it out of our heads.
That was the case, but yeah, there were afternoons I would spend a lot of time watching the.
There's a lot of cyclists in DC. They would put this up at bars and stuff.
I did find that when I lived there.
Yeah, you know, it's a nerdy city. People like to do very niche sports. Cycling seems to be very popular there.
Ironman, very popular in DC, I found.
Really?
Yes, I think there were a lot of just like high octane, high achieving.
A lot of type A people
there.
a lot of type A people.
You know, did these sorts of things. All right, Lisa Mateo, thank you very much. Appreciate that update. I'll be watching. I like the finale. Like going to Paris. It's a big kind of, you see the sights of the city. And
I mean, I will go to Paris for the finale. I'm willing to take that trip if this is something we want to cover.
If asked, she will serve.
All right. I'm happy to take one for the team.
I want to go down to some sound that we got from our colleague Ed Ludlow, who's in San Francisco, of course. He's the host of Bloomberg Tech. He was at an AI summit that took place there yesterday, and Jensen Huang, the CEO of Nvidia, was there as well.
That's right. He spoke exclusively with Bloomberg Tech host Ed Ludlow about the massive $500 billion investment in South Korea's SK Group, as well as recent developments in Chinese AI.
The semiconductor industry has really changed. And the reason for that, because we used to build computers for people to use, and we're going to still continue to build incredible computers. These are now processing AIs for humans to collaborate with. But in the future, we also have AI agents and robots, and they're going to be using computers. So instead of just 1 billion people using computers, we're going to have 100 billion agents and billions of robots all using computers. The computer industry, the chip that's built on top of the chip industry, surely is not big enough. And so this is one of the realizations of the semiconductor industry, that now computers are built not just for people to use, but computers are being built for computers to use. My guess is that the semiconductor industry is probably going to have to be 10 times larger than it is today over the next decade or so. And so working with our partners in Korea and around the world to scale up the supply chain of semiconductors so that we're prepared for this AI future is really important.
I've had the opportunity to ask you about this more than once this year, but how much do you need the Korean economy to kind of get going to increase the supply of HBM bits for NVIDIA-based systems wherever they are?
Well, we don't have enough bits. We're constrained in HBM memories, LPDDR memories. We're constrained in just about every part of the supply chain. We're even constrained now with land and power and construction workers to set up the data centers. I think this is one of the areas that's is going to make sure that we continue to build out in a throttled way, for a decade. And the reason for that is because these infrastructure, unlike electronic devices like PCs and phones and things like that, it's really, really hard to scale up land, power, and shell. And so all of the supply chain just really needs to get built out over the years. I think we have the ability as an industry to double each year, but we're going to have a hard time growing much faster than that.
The $500 billion number is large. Could you just talk a little bit more about what it encompasses? We've gone over a lot on your commitment to the US in terms of spending. Is that NVIDIA spending in the Korean economy, or it's SK fronting capital expenditures? Just a little bit more detail. entail?
We're going to be purchasing memories from them for many years to come. And as you know, we build a lot of computers. In order to build $1 trillion worth of Vera Rubin systems, you're going to have to buy a lot of system memories to go with it. And so we have large purchase agreements and large purchase intentions with SK Hynix. Meanwhile, SK Telecom is going to become an AI cloud. We're starting to build already. They're intending to build up to 2 gigawatts in the near future. And in that agreement, we will be selling AI supercomputers to them. So between us, we're gonna do $500 billion worth of business, over $500 billion worth of business.
I was able to sit down with SK Group Chairman Che Tae-wan very recently for about 40 minutes, and at the end of the conversation, we got to what is the difference in approach, the academic difference in approach on AI between the United States and China. And his view on it was that China is very focused on lowering the dollar per token. In America, we're still focused on the quality of tokens. I wondered what you think of that.
The goal of AI is to produce an intelligent, a smart answer. Now, you could approach it in a couple of different ways. You could, of course, make all of the tokens smarter and smarter, and as a result in using less tokens to do so. You could also produce AIs that are much more efficient, and maybe you can think longer, explore more options, and as a result produce a smart answer. There are many different ways to reach intelligence and deliver smart answers. In the end, really, I think you have to take a step back and just realize that both countries has extraordinary AI researchers. And whatever conditions and whatever resources that they have, amazing people will find great answers. And so my expectation is that China and the United States will continue to advance AI. The conditions are different, the resources are different, their constraints are different, but these amazing researchers will find answers. And I think that in the case of China, they're producing more AI researchers than probably all of the world has, in any given year. And so they're producing, if manufacturing intelligence is important, they manufacture the most important version of it, which is the researchers. And so this is an area, a country that's going to produce excellent AI technology. We ought to continue to learn from them, work with them. As you know, you're here in Silicon Valley, right here in San Francisco. The number of AI researchers here that came from China that are Chinese is really quite significant. And so we're really fortunate to have them here, and we just got to keep on racing.
You made your first post on X.
I did.
And you did so by sharing a letter signed by many of your peers, American companies, to talk about the importance of open models to America, to the industry, to the development of AI. And in the letter, it's pretty well explained, your rationale. But what was the catalyst for now? Why did you and Satya Nadella and others need to do that in this moment?
Well, we sense that there's a growing sentiment and the wrong sentiment for open models. It's really important to realize that open models is essential for safety. Open models is essential for security, for cybersecurity. Open models are essential for innovation. It's necessary for startups. It's necessary for sovereignty, company sovereignty. I see a future where the world uses tons of closed models. And I encourage everybody, including my company, to use OpenAI and Claude and Cursor and Cognition and Perplexity. Use everything that you can because it's out of the cloud, because it's just easier. And you build only what you must. And so in order to build what you must, you need to have open models to do that with. And the areas where we must, maybe it's because we have expertise that we simply cannot afford to share. This is our company's alpha, our company's intelligence, and we have to make sure we keep that proprietary. Maybe it's because our company works in an industry that's regulated, and therefore we simply can't pass along the service level agreement, and we have to make sure that we can deliver fully on the service and the promise that we sign up for. Maybe it's something to do with sovereignty, that you simply, in a particular country, you have to have your own AI. You have to control your own AI. Whatever those reasons are, it could be cost reasons, but I think that largely I would recommend people build their own AIs, especially when they need to control it for whatever reason. And so I think the future is going to have lots and lots of use of AI that's closed and AI that's open that you can then build your own AI. Now, one of the things that people misunderstand about these open models is, yes, you can host it yourself, but you can build your own computer, but most people use computers in the cloud. Frankly, I think closed models are cheaper. If you don't have to build it yourself, if you don't have to train it yourself, it costs a lot of expertise to fine-tune and maintain and guardrail and keep it safe and evaluate it, and then of course even build computers to host it. So there's nothing cheap about doing that. The reason why you need open models is because you need to have control, because you need to adapt something for your own very specialized use cases. And so I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about closed versus open. We felt that it was important for people to understand that there's a world for both.
Open-weighted versus open source as well. There is a distinction.
Open-weighted, as much as open as you can. The more open it is, in the way that we work, we put the weights out there. We also teach people how to train the model from the data that we also open source. And the reason for that is we want to enable you to completely reproduce the AI model that we've open weight. And so that ability, by us teaching you how to do that, you can then do it for yourself. I think the idea that the world is going to be one or the other is just completely wrong, and the idea that open models is somehow unsafe is also fundamentally wrong. And so we just want to make sure that people understand.
Our colleague had a loaded conversation there with Jensen Huang, the CEO of Nvidia. I know we got to talk about the jacket here in a minute, but just to put some context around that interview, we have the president of South Korea in San Francisco for this big conference, and you see Nvidia deploying a lot of capital across South Korea now, investing in AI infrastructure, very much continuing the story that we've talked about a lot on the show, that is this kind of circular nature of investment. But you heard Ed there asking about SK Hynix, this company that went public with its ADR here just a few weeks ago in New York. Nvidia getting very close in both investment and proximity to that company, needing the memory chips there for that larger infrastructure, AI infrastructure.
And it's been interesting watching the Kospi and watching how integral these tech companies, the AI companies, these CapEx chip makers are becoming to that stock market in South Korea. And, hopefully it will continue to grow for them, but it's getting to the point where it's going to be a risk factor if the bottom starts to fall out of that AI buzz.
Always fascinating to hear from Jensen Huang about his vision for where AI is going, and that question that Ed asked, very prescient. China has a very open AI approach.
Right.
Here we have a more closed one. Jensen Huang telling him he sees a world in which you're going to have a little of both, and people are going to determine what they want. But it's not like you're going to go one way or the other.
And saying open models are not inherently unsafe, and that's something he wants to push back
You
on.
want to talk about the jacket?
I'm obsessed with the jacket.
Yeah.
He's always wearing the jackets.
Always.
And I was looking to see if it's the same jacket, if he has many jackets, and one of his jackets just was auctioned off at Sotheby's, and it went for, how much do you think it went for?
$1 million.
Correct.
All right.
$960,000, much higher than the estimated $40,000 to $60,000. All right. We got a new story coming up.
Yes, coming up here, Russia unleashing another day of deadly strikes on Ukraine. We're going to speak to a reporter on the ground in Kyiv ahead of Ukrainian President Zelensky's visit to Washington next week. That's coming up here on Bloomberg This Weekend.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Welcome back to the opening trade.
It's Bloomberg Money.
This is the Asia Trade.
This is Wall Street Week.
Welcome to Balance of Power.
You're watching Bloomberg Deals.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend.
This is Bloomberg Television.
In case you missed it on Daybreak Europe.
We're talks going with the EU regulator on this, though.
Look, as I told you, I interact a lot with Americans and Chinese players, and we see Trump fighting for their companies all the time. We see the Chinese fighting for their companies all the time. Here in Europe, I feel I'm fighting against the European regulators. Not that they are fighting for us, they are fighting against us. It's a big mistake because we need to have really big global tech leaders in Europe.
Don't miss Daybreak Europe, live every weekday.
Welcome to the world of decentralized finance. Bloomberg is covering all things crypto, the people, the transactions, and the technology. Bloomberg Crypto, Tuesdays only on Bloomberg.
Spears is back to take a look under the hood of the business of Formula One.
Hi, I'm here to see Pierre Gasly.
Welcome to my workplace.
Do you feel pressure?
Massive pressure.
Ferrari is the best example that we can be very proud of the past to look after the future.
From the iconic brand setting the standard.
Oh boy.
Can you imagine Ferrari without racing?
No, and I say no, no, no.
To the newcomers forging ahead.
I grew up my whole life racing against the boys.
This global phenomenon continues to chart new territory.
This was a tennis court 8 days ago.
I can't even believe that. And the speed of the business has never moved faster.
My career might stop, I'll still be driving some.
Yeah. Probably very fast.
Yeah.
This is so exciting!
This season, we're along for the ride.
Making money isn't about drowning in emotions. It's about understanding what's actually happening. Markets are the best way to glean signal from noise, and that is what we try to do every morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Wednesday, the Fed decides.
Share wars just around the corner, setting the stage for a real debate. Is this meeting live or not?
Our number one objective is getting policy right. And if we get policy right, we can deliver lower prices.
Trust Bloomberg to bring you the fastest coverage and exclusive analysis.
The sum of this is real GDP and the inflation piled on top of it.
That's going to cause inflation that does come into consumer goods in other ways.
Tune in to Bloomberg Surveillance. The Fed decides, starting at 1:30 p.m. Eastern.
The trading day is about to start.
And you're already looking for that edge.
The opening trade brings you everything you need to know as markets open across Europe. I'm Guy Johnson.
I'm Anna Edwards.
And I'm Tom McKenzie. This is your opening trade.
Only on Bloomberg.
Oh, hello there. Just wanted to say, Primer is back. We've been scouring the frontiers of science and technology to help explain the difference between the next gold rush and whatever this thing is. And in season 2, we're upping the stakes. More danger.
Now that is some high-grade uranium mineralization.
We used to have a stable climate on this Earth. Right now, we do not.
More science.
We're pushing the envelope of technology in multiple directions. Software, hardware, chemistry, physics.
The cable is like very cold.
And more CEOs that can nail the photo shoot.
Hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars are at stake.
While the problems are economic, the solutions are too.
And yes, we will be talking about AI.
There is a lot of humanoid hype out there.
But our future doesn't run on hype. It runs on innovation. Watch season 2 on all these lovely channels.
Every weekday, Bloomberg puts the spotlight on a different aspect of global finance. Flows, funds, and the forces shaping markets on ETF IQ. The future of money with Bloomberg Crypto. The players behind major transactions on Bloomberg Deals. Rates, risk, and the cost of capital on Bloomberg Real Yield. And personal finance, retirement, and wealth management on Bloomberg Money. A different topic every weekday, only on Bloomberg Television.
Welcome back to Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Christina Ruffini here with David Gura. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and President Donald Trump are scheduled to meet next week amid efforts to revive diplomatic talks to try to end the war between Russia and Ukraine.
This coming after Zelensky says he had a good, important conversation on how to reinvigorate diplomacy and bring peace closer with President Trump's envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Joining us now is New York Times Kyiv Bureau Chief Andrew Kramer. Andrew, great to speak with you, and set the table for us as we look ahead to this meeting next week. There have been a series of conversations, if not formal meetings, at these international summits. What do you expect to come out of that meeting in Washington should they get together next week?
Well, thank you very much for having me on, and I apologize for some of the connection problems here. The peace talks essentially stalled even before the Iran war began. For months now, we've had back-channel conversations, but no real progress. It would be an important step if at this meeting, which is scheduled for next week, we see a suggestion that these talks could move forward with probably the central issue being control of the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine, just as it was in February when they broke off last time.
Has there been any movement there from Zelensky? I mean, I remember a year or two ago it was we're going to fight for every inch of territory. Has realism come to Kyiv in the fact that Ukraine does seem to have some momentum at this time, and maybe if they're willing to settle, they know that they can end this, or is that still not something they're willing to talk about out loud?
Well, I think the issue is Ukraine will fight as it has no choice. The issue is, when will Russia settle the war? Country with larger territory, more population, more resources. The talks had held up over a formula for joint political control of the still Ukrainian-controlled portion of the Donbass region, and Putin had insisted and has said publicly that they won't stop fighting until they control this area. And neither side has accepted the compromise of joint control. So I think that right now the war is moving in Ukraine's favor. The momentum and initiative is on Ukraine's side. We have multiple strikes in Russia almost every day, as well as strikes in Ukraine, and the front line has not moved now for months. So the representation had been last fall, the Russian representation, that the Donbass would be captured within 7 or 8 months. This was taken on board by some of on the U.S. side at the meeting in Anchorage and afterward, but that time has now elapsed, and there's been no movement. So it's unclear that Russia could achieve these goals militarily. It's been trying to capture this area for more than 10 years, since 2014, and has not achieved that militarily. There's a window of about 6 months, the Ukrainians believe, while their technological advantage at this stage is still effective before Russia is able to catch up with that. So that's where we're at. It's really a window of Ukrainian advantage, and whether that can be translated into a settlement to stop the war.
Andrew, I want to ask you sort of where we're at in terms of what the fight looks like. And so we've seen reporting by you and others about the way that Ukraine is targeting sites in Russia now, energy sites in particular, in Moscow, St. Petersburg. I was struck listening to Greg Myrie of NPR, who's done a lot of tours of duty in Ukraine, talking about how it's perilous now in Ukraine to go to a gas station to fill up your car, that these are being targeted as well. What does the war look like on the ground today in terms of sort of how it's being prosecuted, excuse me?
Sure. I'm in Zaporizhia, which is in southern Ukraine. It's a city which is often targeted for being closer to the front line. And there are really two wars. There's the battle for control of territory, and there's the air war. And because the ground war has been essentially stalled for more than 2 years now, but really ground to a halt six months or so ago, it's becoming an air war. And both sides are hitting critical infrastructure, military targets, energy sites. So I was just here in Zaporizhia this morning, and we had glide bombs. We had 3 glide bombs come in and target an industrial area of the city. And every other gas station in this town, I think, is blown up. So it's really a long-range attritional warfare using these types of long-range drones and airplanes, and a question of which side can hold out longer. Now, Russia is larger; it has a larger economy and more resources. But there are ways in which this is a disadvantage as well. There's asymmetry because Russia has more of a developed economy. It also has more things that can be broken, that can be blown up by Ukrainian drones. So it has more to lose in this battle. Ukraine has also adapted over 4 years, and the strikes on Russia really only got rolling in a significant way for about a year now. The oil port of Novorossiysk, for example, is now closed. This is 1 million barrels of oil a day exported through there. About a quarter of Russia's refining capacity is destroyed. But just in the last week or so, we had 150 ships were targeted. Russian ships were targeted in the Black Sea. So they have a lot that can be damaged if this goes on.
You're seeing, it seems suddenly, last month or so, this penetration by Ukraine into Russia further and further, targeting these sites. Is that a progression of the technology? Is that a progression of where they feel they are politically and diplomatically, that this is now an acceptable thing that Europe and even the U.S. to some extent will not punish them for? Or is it a little bit of a combination of both?
Well, I think it's a little bit of a combination of both. It's largely technological. These are Ukrainian-made munitions. They don't need to ask permission to use these. It's also a function of geometry. If you look at the map, Ukraine is on the inside of a circle, essentially, and Russia is on the outside of a circle. So once you get past the front line, you're moving into ever and ever larger territories in Russia that are impossible to defend with their defenses, because it's not even you travel an extra 100 miles, you double the range of your drone, you're covering 4 times as much territory. It's an exponential expansion of the territory that needs to be defended by air defenses. And the opposite is true when weapons are coming into a more confined area. So there's an actual geographic advantage in the battlefield, and they're reaching out to ever deeper areas in Russia that are essentially undefendable. There was a strike on 2 men recently, which is in Siberia. They've hit the Omsk refinery, so the ranges are out well over 1,000 miles, and it's a combination of technological advantage and also relying on their own weaponry rather than donated weaponry where there are restrictions.
They have limits, yeah.
Andrew, the minute we have left, I just want to ask you about President Trump's attitude toward the war and toward President Zelensky as well. And Laura Loomer, noted conspiracy theorist, occasional Pentagon correspondent, and Trump whisperer.
MAGA influencer, yeah.
All of that. In Ukraine recently, sat down with Ukrainian media and offered an apology. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
And I feel really terrible for some of the things that I've said. So I would like to apologize on your show to the people of Ukraine for some of the things that I've said about your country, because they've been very kind to me, and I highly doubt that I would be welcomed in Moscow.
An astonishing about-face there from Laura Loomer, which gets me to the other about-face that we've seen from President Trump. So certainly at the NATO summit, the G7 before that, we had President Trump really sounding a more positive note about Ukraine. Again, in the minute we have left here, your assessment just about the U.S. and his engagement with the war now as we see it.
Well, I think Russia has dominated some of the diplomacy for the past year or so, but Ukraine is working hard to make inroads with the MAGA influencers, with the Republican Party in the United States, and that visit to Ukraine, I don't think should be underestimated. That was an important step and accomplishment for Ukraine to win over an important voice in President Trump's movement. There's also been the actual battlefield shifts have favored Ukraine, and I think this is changing the opinion of changing the views of members of the Trump administration.
Andrew, great to speak with you. Thank you very much for taking the time. That's Andrew Kramer. He's the New York Times bureau chief in Kyiv on assignment in Zaporizhia today, and really appreciate your perspective.
Thank you so much. Please stay safe.
During the show.
All right, we're going to continue the discussion on AI after this. Michelle Hussein interviews Karen House. She's the author of Empire of AI.
Really fascinating book, which was very well regarded when it was published just about a year ago. Take us with you no matter where you go. You can watch Bloomberg This Weekend on Bloomberg Television. You can listen to the show on Bloomberg Radio. You can stream us live on the Bloomberg Business app. Wherever you are, we're there as well. It is Bloomberg This Weekend. Stay with us.
We'll be right back.
My old mentor, Roger Staubach, who told me when I transitioned, football will never leave you, but you need to leave it.
Wow.
Everyone has a dream, and a lot of dreams are, my dream is to play football and play professional football, and you get the dream comes true, but it is going to end. And the day it ends, the day before it ends, you're one of the best in the world. Great. The next day you wake up, that's gone. What are you great at? And the truth is nothing, right? I'm not great at anything else.
I talk about it all the time, Steve, is this whole idea of it's not from penthouse to penthouse. And what I mean by that is you played for 15, 20 years, and you're in the penthouse. That doesn't mean that you come to the business world and you're going to be in the penthouse. Now, you don't start in the 3rd floor or the lobby. You actually have to start in the basement.
In case you missed it on Bloomberg Surveillance.
We're journalists, we've got to ask, can this really continue at this rate?
What we see in our data is a consumer spending. If the consumers spend in America, that means the economy is okay, and that probably means the rest of the markets and the construct and the final demand is there.
What are the potential thresholds that could potentially stymie some of the pipeline?
People are borrowing because they see opportunity, whether it's equipment buying, whether it's hiring, whether it's building a plant, whether it's inventory buildup.
Don't miss Bloomberg Surveillance, live every weekday.
Today's CFOs are reshaping the C-suite. Bloomberg's chief future officer shines a spotlight on these dynamic leaders.
What's the skill set that you would advise every aspiring CFO to develop?
Psychology.
I think analytical skills are important. Obviously, you need to like the numbers. If you don't like numbers, then don't go into finance. It's sort of like a recipe for disaster if you don't like numbers.
Not only for the CFO, but also the company's management. That's a communication and the collaboration.
I spend a lot of time figuring out how to take the complex and make it simple, and then finding a way to be able to communicate that both internally and externally.
I think it's relationships, whether it's working with investors, bankers, with the senior management team, with the board. Having your head down is one thing as a finance person, but keeping your ears open is super important as well. And I think that all of that is what kind of builds out being a successful CFO.
Watch Chief Future Officer only on Bloomberg.
At 9:30 a.m., the market tells you what it's really thinking.
We beat the drum to the opening bell.
With deep analysis of the forces driving the price action.
Focusing investors on what really matters.
Where the money flows, which markets are changing.
Conversations with players shaping the narrative.
Innovative growth companies gravitate to NASDAQ.
It's not just like, let's buy the Mag 7 or AI.
That's a really compelling story.
This is where your trading day begins.
And this is Open Interest.
Only on Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm David Gura with Christina Ruffini and Lisa Mateo. Earlier, we heard from Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang about the future of AI. On the latest episode of The Michelle Hussein Show, journalist and author Karen Howe argues artificial intelligence can be developed without concentrating power, exploiting workers, or consuming vast resources.
AI is like the word transportation. Transportation refers to everything from bicycles to rockets. And in the same way, AI refers to a very vast collection of different technologies, some of which are designed kind of like rockets. They're very resource intensive and they exact a lot of cost to produce. And so in general, we only deploy rockets for a very narrow subset of transportation needs. We never go around and say every single person should have a rocket and use that rocket for every single one of their transportation needs. That would destroy the environment, and it would also just be really inefficient and probably not actually get people to places faster because of the amount of time it would take to boot up the rocket. And so what I suggest in my book and throughout my other work is that we need to shift our portfolio of AI technologies to better reflect the kinds of specialized AI that we in fact need to tackle real societal challenges. Things like improving healthcare and accelerating drug discovery. DeepMind's AlphaFold, it is an example of a system that I call a bicycle of AI. It is a system that predicts with high accuracy how an amino acid sequence will fold into a protein structure. This is really important for accelerating the understanding of human disease and then designing drugs to target those diseases. And it won the Nobel Prize for chemistry. This is a technology, even though it's called AI and ChatGPT is also called AI, DeepMind's AlphaFold is one that is fundamentally different from how ChatGPT is produced and how it operates. It uses very little data. It uses very little computing resources, and there's no need for labor exploitation either. And it's still able to provide a lot of benefits. So my question is, when you look at the portfolio of AI technologies, wouldn't you want to pick the ones that have great benefit, very little cost? Why would you want to pick the ones that have very great cost?
Right, but these are value judgments, right? And something that you think has no value, someone else might. Like, let's take AI in defense. Mm-hmm. We know already that many armies use it for targeting and the use of weapons. You might see that as wrong. Others might see that this is necessary defense. It's part of the defense of your realm. And if you're not going to do it through the tools of our age, then you're going to fall behind. And the bad actors, terrorists, bad governments, whatever, are going to get you.
Yeah, I think that's a particularly controversial issue where people fall in different places. What I'm arguing is there's many different ways to produce AI. You do not need to unlock the benefits of AI through a corrosive approach. So why are we not holding these companies to those higher standards?
I'm conscious that both Anthropic and OpenAI are heading towards public offerings of their shares. Is that a moment that you think could bring greater accountability, that once a company is public and it's got all kinds of investors and it's got annual general meetings, that a level of scrutiny that is lacking comes in, a useful one?
I do think it could be. I am hopeful that it could be, because when companies become public, they do institute more governance structures. But I lay this critique on existing public companies as well. I call Google, Amazon, Microsoft empires of AI as well. I do think that ultimately governance needs to come from the public and from publicly elected officials as well, not just the market forces.
Like, do you think Anthropic is a more principled company than OpenAI?
No.
Even though it stood up to the Pentagon?
So interestingly, Dario Amodei, CEO of Anthropic, said that he actually did not have issues with fully autonomous weapons. In fact, he believed that this was a technology where the US probably should keep up. The problem was simply that he didn't want this version of Claude to be used for that.
And Claude has been used in AI-assisted targeting. It's been used in Iran. I think it's reportedly been used on the raid on Maduro in Venezuela as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Are you also following the Chinese AI players, DeepSeek, and other companies like that?
Very, very loosely.
Do you believe that they behave differently, or do you accuse them of imperialism also?
It's really interesting. They do behave differently because of a very particular reason. So when ChatGPT first came out, all of the Chinese tech giants did the same thing as the other US tech giants, which was try to make their own version of ChatGPT. I was at the Wall Street Journal at the time. So it was actually right before ChatGPT came out. The US government used this mechanism called export controls to block Chinese companies from getting access to the most cutting edge AI computer chips. And those are the ones that are designed by Nvidia. And so all of a sudden, the entire country of China and these Chinese companies faced an enormous constraint on one of the core resources that US companies were using to supercharge their AI development. So Chinese companies had to take a different route. They were not able to scale the same way that the US companies were. And that, I think, is what led to DeepSeek. DeepSeek was an example of a Chinese company figuring out how to develop the same capabilities of AI, these AI models, but for a significantly less fraction of computational resources. DeepSeek illustrates the exact point that I'm making, that it is in fact possible to produce AI, different types of AI, and also the same exact kind of AI with significantly less resources, and therefore have a much less corrosive impact on community and planetary health. So why are we not doing that?
All right, you can watch and listen to the entire interview at Bloomberg.com and wherever you get your podcasts.
We're coming up on 9 o'clock here in New York City.
The next hour of Bloomberg This Weekend starts right now.
Welcome to Bloomberg This Weekend, live from New York with David Gura, Christina Ruffini, and Lisa Mateo. The latest headlines, key analysis, big interviews, and the stories that hit home on your days off.
Welcome back to Bloomberg This Weekend, coming to you live from Bloomberg's world headquarters in New York. I'm Christina Ruffini.
David Gura alongside Lisa Mateo here on Saturday, July the 25th. No U.S. strikes overnight on Iran, but we did see the Houthis active once again in the region, and President Trump was at the kind of postponed or the second version of the White House Correspondents Association dinner in Washington, D.C. We were there for the first one. That, of course, was canceled very quickly after a gunman made it through security there, but the president kind of going about the routine that he had planned for that night last night, as well as we heard from Jeff Mason a few minutes ago.
That's right. Some awkward moments, but mostly, you know, a dinner as they all are. But there's a couple of things brewing coming up for next week. First of all, we've had this announcement from the Trump administration that they want to enter a nominally civilian nuclear program with Saudi Arabia, but some pushback on that, given that the president then tweeted that that's going to have to come after Saudi normalizes relations with Israel, something that they look unwilling to do. We're going to unpack that shortly. And then we also have the president of Ukraine likely visiting the White House next week, as well as the funeral for Senator Lindsey Graham, and a lot of dignitaries from around the world, possibly the Israeli Prime Minister as well, will be in town for that.
Yeah, charting that over the course of the week, of course. Let's get up to date on the headlines now from Lisa Mateo, here with us in New York.
You got in a big win for one of India's largest student movements in years. The country's education minister has resigned after protests over exam paper leaks. Analysts say it shows the government is finally taking accountability and responsibility for the leaks that impact millions of youth. Protesters, well, they've since ended their demonstrations. To the latest in the Middle East, where the Houthis now claim to have struck southern Saudi Arabia with missiles on the Red Sea coast. Now, this comes after Saudi-led coalition forces in Yemen. They carried out a military operation against Houthi military targets near a port in the southern Red Sea. Now, this escalation, it compounds an already severe squeeze on regional energy flows. The U.S. military did not announce any strikes on Iran overnight, and Iranian media did not report any Islamic Republic strikes on U.S. bases. Well, last night, President Trump talked about the war in Iran while headlining a scaled-down White House Correspondents Dinner. Came 3 months after the original event was cut short by a gunman.
They are talking to us right now. They'd love to make a deal. I don't think they're ready to. I don't think it's time yet, but I'm willing to listen.
It was Trump's first time speaking at the annual event, which he did not attend during his first term. Now, before attending the dinner, President Trump, he hosted the leaders of 4 advanced nuclear reactor companies at the White House to commend their technology hitting a milestone. Trump sees nuclear reactors as a key source of power for data centers and economic growth. Now, while he was there, the president took questions from reporters about the exit strategy in Iran.
There's 2 ways. I mean, it's you can just keep doing exactly what we're doing and take them apart piece by piece. We can do it in a more rapid fashion, which we might do, or we can negotiate with them, which we're also doing right now.
Now, either way, President Trump added that the U.S. is locked and loaded and ready to go. Well, in other news, the Trump administration facing fresh legal challenge to the president's latest round of global tariffs that took effect Friday. Small businesses filed lawsuits in the U.S. Court of International Trade accusing President Trump and U.S. officials of unlawfully using Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 to replace earlier tariffs that were struck down by the Supreme Court. The Trump administration, they announced Thursday that the U.S. will collect duties of between 10% and 12.5% on imports from most major trading partners. David and Christina.
And just getting started, it sounds like, from what we heard from Brendan Murray at the top of the show. Look, there's still another 301 investigation taking place centering on excess capacity. It does seem like the administration's kind of found its sweet spot here. It feels confident that this is on sound legal ground and it's going to kind of go down this road.
We'll have to see. I mean, obviously, there are already court challenges in the works. So thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
This week, the Trump administration signed a landmark nuclear cooperation deal with Saudi Arabia, as we mentioned earlier. Only 2 days later, the president then added the caveat that that country must join the Abraham Accords, establishing relations with Israel. Take a listen.
In order to do it, they have to be a member of the Abraham Accords, which have been very successful. But it's time now that they do it. They and others didn't want to do it because of the problem that they had with Iran. You don't have that problem anymore. You don't have a great power there anymore. You have a problem, but the problem is disappearing day by day. They were the bully of the Middle East. They were not going to be that much of a bully anymore.
Joining us now is Karen Young. She's a senior research scholar at Columbia Center on Global Energy Policy and a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute. And Karen, there's a lot to talk about. Eager to talk to you about oil and gas, the broader region. But let's start with this issue if we could. I'm very curious sort of how you watch this conversation unfolding. Yes, the initial proposal there from the president that he would help Saudi Arabia with its civilian nuclear program. And then this turn that we saw a little bit later in the week, that there was this very important caveat that he was placing on that agreement.
That's right. It's been full of surprises, and this is typical Trump in some ways.
post hoc, changing the terms of the deal or creating some arm twisting to sweeten the deal. Normalization, as far as we know, has never been part of the Saudi nuclear agreement with the United States. And this agreement is something that's been in the works, part of negotiations in the Biden administration and in the Trump administration, and had really been sitting very much completed since the end of last year. So, it raises questions like why the announcement now, and then why the kind of turnabout after it was announced, and putting this sort of onus on Secretary Wright that perhaps the terms weren't what the White House wanted. It creates a sense of chaos, frankly.
I know this deal has been around for a while, like you mentioned, but I don't know if it has been around. Has it always been around in this form? Obviously, the controversial bit of this deal is the fuel and whether or not that's going to be enriched in Saudi Arabia, and what the limitations on that will be, whether it be some form of a black box system that the U.S. controls. Was that always part of the deal, or at some point did this deal look a lot more like what the U.S. entered into with the UAE in 2009, which is considered the gold standard of these arrangements, where they have nothing to do with the fuel, there's no capacity for enrichment, it is a purely civilian nuclear program?
Well, we have to see the actual language, and it hasn't been released. But in general terms, Saudi Arabia has wanted to reserve the right for enrichment into the future, simply because they have large supplies domestically of uranium, and they wanted to be able to have the capacity to use what they have at home. This is still a 1, 2, 3 agreement, and those are the agreements that the U.S. government makes with other governments to share nuclear technology. So it's similar to the one that was signed and is in place with the United Arab Emirates. But supposedly there's a bit of difference in terms of the kind of 10-year review period for enrichment, for the fuel cycle, and also a bit different in terms of the standard for the IAEA inspections. And so those are the two kind of points that perhaps are in language are different from previous agreements in the region.
I want to play some sound here from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He was at the ASEAN conference a little bit earlier this week talking about the prospects for there being some sort of diplomatic solution to the impasse that we see in the Middle East. Let's take a listen to what he had to say just about the administration's approach to that currently.
These people who are calling us every day begging, let's do a deal, they send us messages through other countries, third countries. They're running out of countries to send. Even I had countries here coming up to me, I just spoke to the Iranians, they want to do a deal. The problem is, every time these people do a deal, they either break it or after they make it, they want to change the deal. So they're probably not ready to do a deal yet, but they will be soon.
Karen, I want to get your sense of sort of where we are in this. I heard you in conversation on a podcast a few weeks back talking about the volatility that we've been having and are likely to expect here in the months ahead. But we have seen, obviously, that MOU not being worth the paper that it was printed on. We've seen the ceasefire dissolve here in recent days. As you listen to the Secretary of State talking about the Iranian appetite for there being a deal, you hear the president saying they want a deal, but we're not there yet. How do you see all of this unfolding? What is going to be the forcing mechanism, do you think, that's going to bring both of these parties back to the table, if they in fact do?
So, as I have said, we should expect volatility for some time. We're not seeing any kind of restoration of 100% pre-February 28th traffic in the Strait of Hormuz, and we might not ever. We're going to get the diversions. We're going to rely on those more, and it's just going to be a long time coming. But, the idea that we could get a settled agreement with Iran is probably going to be kicked down the road, I would imagine. Simply because the U.S. and others still expect that we are creating change inside of Iran, and that the deal makers themselves might be different in the months to come. Now, what's interesting, the signal that I think you mentioned at the outset of the program, is that last night we did not see strikes on Iran or retaliations by Iran on the region. And so we have expected, we've entered this kind of what some call the third and final push of the conflict, Trump making an effort to really go hard on Iran. I think that will probably persist another week or so. And the president sometimes changes his mind. What the military has been in place to do, he may back down. And we don't know, and many would argue that increased military pressure on Iran doesn't necessarily change their calculus. It just sort of reinforces their own bargaining positions and their willingness to sustain more damage.
I mean, the one thing I think everyone learned from this conflict is that it's not just the nuclear card Iran can play. It is that they can now close the strait at will, which is almost even a more of immediate effect on the global economy. So we've seen a lot of these producers and talks of ramping up ways to get that oil out a different way, out through these pipelines through the Red Sea. What we were talking to our colleague in Singapore, Stephen Szybczynski, about earlier is that you now have the Houthis kind of revving up and starting to strike Saudi Arabia. They claim that they hit Saudi with some missiles last night. And I'm wondering, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked him. It seems to me there's two issues here. There's conflict and danger at the actual export point in the Red Sea. And then there is the danger to production if the Houthis start being able to target refineries and oil producing facilities inside Saudi. Which of those are they both a threat? And what are the big concerns here, especially for the global energy market?
The Houthis are absolutely a concern, and this has always been an issue. To what extent are the Houthis a proxy of Iran? To what extent are they making their own decisions and having their own kind of side negotiations with Saudi Arabia? And they had been in a truce for several years, and Saudi Arabia had been paying, for example, the public sector salaries of the Yemeni government in order to sort of keep some of that peace in place. So the attacks on Jazan are very serious. Threats, of course, to Yanbu are very, very serious because, what has basically been the relief valve from the Strait of Hormuz has been Saudi exports through the East-West pipeline, which are exported at Yanbu and then go through the Bab el-Mandeb. That's going to be about 5 million barrels a day of exports that we would see in danger. So the Houthis have a card there, but they also have their own agency. And so I would expect that Saudi Arabia is going to enter into negotiations with them as quickly as possible and try to calm this down. And the Houthis can be placated and not directly in all forms, controlled by Iran, though they do certainly rely on Iran for support and certainly military supplies.
Karen, we saw oil creep up again this week, over $100 a barrel, and I had a number of conversations last week at the Aspen Security Forum with Megan O'Sullivan and Fatih Birol about global complacency as this war got underway, and we've heard the president say time and time again, look, I heard, as I considered launching these strikes, oil could get to $200 a barrel, say, and lo, it didn't. And I think with that is born this level of complacency that maybe this didn't have the ramifications that a lot of people feared. Are you of the camp that believes that if this war continues in the way in which it seems it is, there are going to be dramatic spikes? There's going to be a lot more difficulty here. We've seen reserves drawn down and we haven't seen them replenished. Sort of, how do you see this playing out over the next 6 to 12 months if status quo doesn't change?
That's right. I see continued volatility. It doesn't necessarily mean $200 a barrel, but this is really contingent on a couple of things. Chinese demand, for one. We've seen a reduction of about 4 million barrels a day not, being used or wanted in China. When and how that rebounds will really matter a lot. And the second thing is the inventory question. So we've drawn down quite a bit. Can we do that 1, 2, 3 more times? Probably not. So if we get a real obstruction in the Strait of Hormuz and in the Bab el-Mandeb, we're going to have to rely on inventory releases. If that's a 1-month closure, maybe that's a 200 million barrel release needed again. If that's 2 or 3 months, it's probably twice that. That's analysis by JP Morgan. It's not really clear that we have sort of the international will to do so or the capacity to do so. So we could still see by the end of this year, certainly temporary spikes in prices well above $100. And then, if we see easement of shipments happening again. What made June so interesting and why we saw this rush of flow, a lot of that was, cargoes that were laden, sitting in the Gulf, ready to go out and sit in the waters outside of China, about 120 million barrels of oil. That's not going to happen again either. So, the relief that we saw in the middle of the summer when the MOU was in place, it's hard to imagine that we get to another temporary agreement with Iran where you would see the same relief to oil markets.
Karen, always good to speak with you. Hope you'll come on again soon. It's Karen Young of Columbia University joining us on this Saturday morning. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. All right, on Thursday, 6 contenders vying to be the next United Nations Secretary General argued their case to lead the world body at a time when conflicts in Iran, Gaza, and Ukraine, as well as divisions among global powers, have deepened concerns about the agency's effectiveness.
They spoke at UN headquarters here in New York in a debate that was moderated by Bloomberg Television.
Our responsibility is to make the UN relevant again, to deliver, to touch the hearts and souls of people on the ground, to serve people on the ground, and not to confuse activity with impact.
Well, I believe moral authority is always needed. And you always need to speak out on the issues where violation of human rights have been, or where the violation of international law and humanitarian law is there. But of course, you have to insist on finding ways to put people together.
And what we need to do is to restore this credibility of the UN as a valid interlocutor, and then use the tools at hand.
I would like to see a UN that is back at the table in the scenarios of conflict. I would like to see a UN that has rebuilt trust, but has used that trust to deliver results on the ground.
The UN must be more present, especially in the peace and security arena, that we would have moved from where we are today to a UN that is delivering better in peace and security, both on the prevention side and ending of conflict side.
Because in reality, global security, peace and stability is something that is incumbent on the Security Council, and the lack of trust between the members today, particularly between the permanent members, is that means that crises go on without solutions being found.
You can watch that full debate at Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg Business app. And Christina, just a fascinating moment for the UN, as you mentioned at the top there. This is an institution that's going to have this leadership change. Antonio Guterres has been there for a long time. And as you saw there, several women vying for this position. There has not been a woman leading the UN in its entire history.
That might be a nice change.
Yeah.
As we're seeing women be less common in cabinets around the world, especially into positions like defense minister and foreign minister, it would be nice to get those numbers back up, maybe led by the UN. Although there's, of course, a big debate about the relevancy of that body, and it's not a great time for multilateralism.
Facing a dire financial situation as well, but a fascinating debate there, moderated by our colleagues Romain Bostic and Hislinda Aman. All right, coming up next here, what is the future of defense technology? My conversation with the president of Anduril Industries for this weekend's C-Suite Saturday. We're going to talk about that company's work on the supply chain, on drones, on making weapons less expensively and faster. That's coming up on Bloomberg This Weekend, on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, Bloomberg.com, and the Bloomberg Business app.
Western countries, all of them are cutting funding to Africa. And some of these programs were supported by funding coming from Western countries, like for human resources, for testing, for transportation of samples. And suddenly, African countries have to think how to fund money and to cover this gap. But it takes some time. And I think the combination of all of these factors are fueling this mistrust that we see at community level. We value the support we got and we are still getting from the US. And we think that if we continue to work together, and there is no reason for the US not to work with Africa CDC, Africa CDC is the leader in terms of public health in Africa.
When news breaks,
a redhead across the Bloomberg terminal.
Bloomberg has you covered.
Trump's global tariffs are struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court.
For all the context and clarity you need.
There's going to be now tons of tariff headlines until midterm elections.
Hear it first on Bloomberg.
The global economic playbook is being rewritten, and the levers of power are moving in real time.
To see where the world is headed, you have to look where the action is.
I'm Hislinda Aman in Singapore.
I'm Menika Doshi in Mumbai.
Welcome to Emerging the New Economy podcast.
Each month, we dive deep into how the world's most exciting rising economies are shaping the global future.
Join the conversation. Subscribe to Emerging on your favorite podcast platform today.
In case you missed it on the opening trade.
The history of technology has not been more leisure, right? We all have dishwashers at home, but we don't spend less time in the kitchen. So my thesis is that there's aggregate job opportunity. Ramp does enterprise payments, expenses. Revelo looks at labor market data, and they actually find companies that spend more on AI are hiring more. So that the data shows about 6 to 12 month lag, but 10% more workers. There's an interesting story there.
There's a lot of churn in the labour market, but then maybe not lower employment?
Absolutely. I think there will be shifts, right? And we can't get away from that. But in aggregate, I think there's more opportunity. I think we're going to be doing more types of work. And there's a lot of latent work that's just not happening.
And you still need to hire the young people. Is that also the message to make?
Absolutely.
Tunde has views on this.
I mean, Ravello's analysis said they were hiring more young people. So 10% overall, 12% more young people.
Don't miss the opening trade, live every weekday.
Earnings season is here.
The earnings story has been so powerful.
Bloomberg is first to break the numbers.
Blackstone reporting a larger than expected jump.
All right, guys, I want to go to T-Mobile.
We're keeping an eye on those earnings out of Oracle.
Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, Google.
With the smartest insights.
We have seen a consumer that has been and continues to be resilient.
There's a lot of reason to believe that there's still a huge amount of growth here.
Continuing coverage on Bloomberg. From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg.
Thank you for joining us live on Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Lisa Mateo. Let's update you on today's top stories. The race to replace former Senate candidate Grant Plattner will come to an end today at the Maine Democratic Party nominating convention in Bangor. Now, it's underway right now. Democrats, they are expected to elevate Troy Jackson as their party's nominee in the showdown with longtime Republican Senator Susan Collins. Well, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung wrapped up a 2-day visit to San Francisco, meeting with global AI leaders, Silicon Valley venture capitalists, and also Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang. Now, Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow, he spoke exclusively with Huang at a Korean AI summit, who talked more about the U.S. versus China approach to AI.
In the case of China, they're producing more AI researchers than probably all of the world has, in any given year. And so they're producing, if manufacturing intelligence is important, they manufacture the most important version of it, which is the researchers.
Well, sticking with tech, Samsung has won a contract worth more than $200 billion to make chips for Broadcom. And the pact will run for 5 years through 2030 and expands the two companies' collaboration across memory and foundry technology. And Paramount, Skydance, and Warner Brothers Discovery say they will hold off on closing their $110 billion deal until June unless the legal fight over the merger is resolved sooner. California and 11 other states, well, they sued to block the merger. It's a pricey pause for Paramount, though, which had agreed to pay roughly $7 million a day to Warner Brothers shareholders. That's beginning October 1st until that deal is closed. David and Christina.
Pricey. We'll see what happens there as we see the state's attorneys general.
Can I start fining people that amount of money?
Sure. Levy those fines.
I don't know what to I don't know what the mechanism would be, but I'm going to look into it. All right. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
The ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East have raised new questions about the future of warfare. Ukraine has used relatively inexpensive drones to gain an advantage over Russia, and we've seen Iran deploy similar technology.
Chris Brose is the president of Anduril Industries, a U.S. defense contractor that wants to change the way weapons are manufactured to do it faster and at a lower cost. I spoke with him on the sidelines of the Aspen Security Forum in Colorado.
You had to convince people that, China was a pacing threat. You had to convince them that, kind of new defense technology was going to be really important, things like drones and artificial intelligence. And, you got a lot of eye rolls, from people who more or less thought this stuff was science fiction. And I think, you fast forward now to 2026, I think the threat landscape is completely upside down. I think you have, seen obviously in the war in Ukraine, but then in a lot of other theaters around the world, that this technology is absolutely here, right? The future of warfare is not something that's going to happen to us in a decade and we have time to get ready. It's very much unfolding now. A lot of these, robotic systems, drones, autonomous systems, different kinds of weapons, this is all here, right? And it's only getting better, it's only getting faster, and it's proliferating everywhere. So again, when you look at something like Operation Epic Fury, you see an environment that is far less permissive for the United States to operate in terms of flying aircraft. It's been publicly reported reported, we've lost a lot of remotely piloted aircraft and other things. The ability to obviously kind of transit the Strait of Hormuz when it's coming under threat from, one-way attack drones and sort of, weaponized robotic boats and other things. This, I think, is just a harbinger of many, many, many things to come. And it's a very different landscape than what we were seeing 10 years ago. And I think the big so what for the United States is, how are we going to continue to be, militarily advantageous and relevant in a future where this technology is getting better faster and it's proliferating everywhere.
Situate Anduril in that conversation. So we'd had these legacy weapons providers for a very long time. You're now competing with them. You talked about kind of the difficulty of conveying to people 10 years ago where things were headed.
Yeah.
Are we at a point now where policymakers in Washington around the world get it? This is sort of where things are going.
I think they do. And I think that, the question has always been, when we go from kind of getting it and internalizing the lessons to actually driving that into different behavior. And I think that that's starting to happen, right? So I think that, I give the current administration a lot of credit for really starting to do the things that a lot of people for a lot of time had been talking about, but not really doing kind of at scale. So as an example, we at Anduril are, working a collaboration with the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Army. And again, this is all very much driven through the administration's leadership to mass produce low-cost cruise missiles. So, systems that are quite capable, very long range, but also much cheaper, much simpler, easier to build than kind of our legacy weapon systems. So the whole idea of being able to build much larger quantities of systems at a much lower price point to be able to kind of get those inventories larger to deal with these kinds of potential protracted conflicts. Like, I think it's an example, and there's a lot of others, of how this is starting to change. But the real question is not, can we go to conferences like this and say things that reflect the fact that we think things are different, but are we actually changing our behavior? Are we putting our money, whether it's as industry or as the government, actually where our mouth is in terms of, getting it increasingly into those kind of new areas of capability that are going to be so important now and into the future?
So when we talk about the Barracuda 500, as you talk about, it's a leaner supply chain, things move faster.
Yeah.
How are you able to do that? So we look at kind of the hindrances of the past.
Yeah.
What is Anduril able to do now that makes it easier to produce things at scale and much faster?
Yeah, a lot of this is not trickery and, kind of highfalutin technology, right? I mean, I think it really comes back to starting from the beginning and from the premise that, you have to design weapons and other defense systems that are far simpler, that are easier, faster, and cheaper to build, and can be built by a much larger workforce than our traditional weapon systems where, the people who can contribute from a workforce perspective are often very highly skilled. They take years to get into a position of really being able to contribute on the manufacturing side. So we kind of come in it from a very different perspective, which is, if at the end result I want to have a system that is, mass producible by the largest number of people on the fastest timeline for the lowest price in the largest volume, you would make radically different choices at the design phase. And that's what we've done. So designing out a lot of the, complexity and a lot of the critical materials and a lot of the things that make weapons, traditional weapons, so much more exquisite, so much more expensive, so much harder to build and build at scale and build at speed. So that's really, I think, at the essence what the Barracuda is. It's actually a relatively simple system, and it's designed that way on purpose. And then sort of how you go about making that system more intelligent, more capable, I would say that's where the real, kind of special sauce comes in from a software perspective, the advanced autonomy, where you can now have systems collaborating together, in a way that you really aren't able to do with traditional weapons because you're firing them sort of one at a time. So it's this combination of like very advanced software, but then very simplified design and design for mass production.
So we've talked about kind of U.S. demand for this. I know they're going to be produced in Poland as well.
Yeah.
Talk a bit about Europe's demand for weapons at this moment in time, so drawing upon your past experience in the Senate and policy and also just your current experience now. How do you stand to kind of help Europe with that as you look at kind of the eastern flank of NATO? Yeah,
so it's a complicated picture in Europe. I think, the good news is that European countries have gotten the message. I give the Trump administration a fair amount of credit, but, not all the credit. I think the Europeans deserve a lot of credit, too, in terms of really starting to meaningfully increase their defense budgets. And, that's happening across the NATO alliance. There still are laggards, but for the most part, this is going in the right direction. So that's the good news. I think the challenge for American companies is with that increase in European defense spending, a lot of those European countries want that money to go to their own companies and to build up their own production capacity. And that makes a ton of sense. I think they've been very frustrated with the year-long delays that they're seeing in, kind of the U.S. foreign military sales process of buying weapons that are then exported to from the U.S. to Europe. So they want to be able to build up their own capacity to rearm themselves. And I think there's obviously, a European jobs component to that too, which is important. So I think for our perspective at Anduril, right, we can't sort of show up in the traditional way and say, we're here to export you things that were made in America. So I think the way we're going about it, and the Poland example that you offered is a good one, is really building with Europe, in Europe, for Europe. So the ability to team with PGZ, the state-owned armaments company in Poland, to take that Barracuda system that we've designed and actually have it built in Poland by PGZ with Polish engineers and Polish manufacturing technicians and workers, and then be able to scale that and provide that out of Poland to other NATO allies. And I think that's really just the beginning. I mean, I think you'll also see us, increasingly looking also to incorporate or kind of collaborate with different kinds of companies across Europe, whether those are commercial production companies, traditional defense companies, kind of new entrants, kind of new European defense companies, and then possibly actually look to land Anduril in Europe as a European company with European leadership and workforce and production capacity with a significant investment of us going into Europe. I think we're open to all of this. And, as I think it was said here earlier today, different European countries are going to have different demands and different desires and needs. And, we're just trying to meet different countries where they're at and really give them the benefit of what they want from the United States, which is access to technology and know-how and capital without having to go through, kind of the traditional process, kind of intermediated by the U.S. government of buying these things exported from the U.S., with all of the, kind of attendant delays and frustrations that come with that.
I want to ask you lastly about weapons scarcity. It's something a lot of folks are talking about since the start of the war in Iran. And when that conversation comes up, invariably there are people who say, we're not going to be as well equipped if something happens in Asia.
Yeah.
How are you thinking about that? You've sounded the alarm about the prospects of there being war with Taiwan for a long time.
Yeah.
How worried should we be about preparedness, and how worried are you about the prospects of there being conflict in that part of the world?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the good news is that the weapons sector in the United States has never been more, kind of energized, whether that's traditional weapons makers, kind of new weapons producers like us and others. There's a huge amount of government focus and sort of resource going into this. Again, give the leadership of the Pentagon a lot of credit for actually getting into the nuts and bolts of why we've had a lot of these problems in terms of funding challenges, lack of multi-year demand signal, and I think a lot of that's starting to get fixed, and we're a beneficiary of that, right? I mean, we're signing multi-year framework agreements with the United States Army, with the United States Air Force for this, Barracuda 500 low-cost cruise missile program. I think the challenge is going to be now we need to get building, and that takes time. I think it's impossible to look at something like Epic Fury and not be sort of a bit struck by the fact that, again, according to public reports, we've kind of gone through something like a decade's worth of Tomahawk production and a few months of that conflict. Those systems take years to build back. So if we're using them there, they're not available elsewhere. So that's just a reality that we're going to have to contend with. But I kind of go back to where I started. I think the good news now is that everybody, in government, industry, old, new, American, European, everybody is focused on this question of munitions scarcity, kind of weapons inventory, need for weapons production. I think there's a huge opportunity to really get this problem right, which has been a problem that I think many of us have known has existed for a very long time, and we're now actually seeing that come to light in these, kind of current examples. Those realities are what they are. We can't wish them away. They are there. I think the only thing that we can do, which is now starting to happen, is we just need to build a different kind of weapons inventory, where the challenge is not, how do we build back what we had? It's how do we build back 10x what we had or 20x what we had, because that's what I think we're going to need to be ready for, not just one conflict, but potentially multiple simultaneously, and to be able to do this as a function of time, where that war is not going to be over in days and weeks. It's going to, regrettably, I fear, stretch on into months and years. And that to me is one of the key lessons of Iran and Ukraine and a lot of these current conflicts. And that's, I think, what we're going to have to be ready for in the United States, which is this reality of protracted conflict coming back to us.
Chris has been at this company for a while, and he talked there, as you heard him say, that initially it was hard to make inroads as an upstart defense contractor in the U.S. Now they certainly have, and as we've talked about on the show many times, the way that defense procurement works radically changed by these two conflicts that are taking place.
I think so, and also there's movement from inside the Pentagon. We talked to the Chief of Naval Operations, who said the system is broken. So there is a bottom-up nexus to try to get that changed and get these startups. I have seen more of them recently. All right, coming up, The Odyssey, the summer's biggest blockbuster. How much do you know about the original story from 3,000 years ago? The woman whose translation helped inspire the film, up next.
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories. And we're here, where the action starts in Sydney. And in Tokyo, get ahead as the global trading day begins. The Asia Trade, weekdays only on Bloomberg.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives, and that revolution is playing out in real time. From finance to defense tech, AI to entertainment, from the road to the stars. Bloomberg is bringing you the stories of companies and people that are pushing tech to new frontiers, and the politics reshaping global tech markets. I'm Ed Ludlow, live in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Tech.
Every weekday only on Bloomberg Television.
The countdown is on. Everything you need to get the edge at the end of the market day. Get ahead of tomorrow's trading with The Close. Weekdays on Bloomberg. Context changes everything. Wednesday, the Fed decides.
Share wars just around the corner, setting the stage for a real debate. Is this meeting live or not?
Our number one objective is getting policy right. And if we get policy right, we can deliver lower prices.
Trust Bloomberg to bring you the fastest coverage and exclusive analysis.
The sum of this is real GDP and the inflation piled on top of it.
That's going to cause inflation that does come into consumer goods in other ways.
Tune in to Bloomberg Surveillance. The Fed decides, starting at 1:30 p.m. Eastern.
What was it like starting all over again? One day you're in a big company with a big parent, and then you have to start all over again.
You know, it was really exciting and invigorating. I felt like a young kid again when I started Jones Road. And right before we launched, I definitely had a sudden emotion of saying, uh-oh, what if I'm a one-hit wonder? I was a little scared, but then I just threw it up into the wind and went for it.
Jones Road, where'd that name come from?
Well, I sold the rights to Bobby Brown to Estee Lauder when we sold the company, so I couldn't use it again. So we needed a name because I wanted to launch Jones Road the day my 25-year non-compete was up. I needed a name, and I didn't have one. And I was driving to the Hamptons with my husband. My head was down on Waze, and I looked down, I saw Jones Road, and I said, Jones Road Beauty. He said, I like it. And that's how it became Jones Road.
What is going to be the consequence for U.S. markets?
We are seeing modest gains across European equity markets.
Take a look at how we're faring when it comes to Asian markets. In case you missed it on Daybreak Europe.
We're talks going with the EU regulator on this, though.
Look, as I told you, I interact a lot with Americans and Chinese players, and we see Trump fighting for their companies all the time. We see the Chinese fighting for their companies all the time. Here in Europe, I feel I'm fighting against the European regulators. Not that they are fighting for us, they are fighting against us. It's a big mistake because we need to have really big global tech leaders in Europe.
Don't miss Daybreak Europe, live every weekday.
Key investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories. Insight with Haslinda Amin, only on Bloomberg.
In case you missed it, on the close.
You're entering into Mexico, your first store there, a big one out there in the Monterrey region. Why do you think you can make that work?
We believe Mexico is a really important milestone for our great brand as we continue to lean into our global strategy. It's an important country for us. We recognize and admire the culinary heritage.
There's a little bit of irony when it comes to the fact that Chipotle Mexican Grill is opening up, expanding into Mexico. And with that in mind, what changes do you have planned for Mexico.
We'll locally source as much of the product we bring over the border today as it relates to avocados and tomatoes and peppers, but it'll be the same menu we've launched in Western Europe, the same menu we launched in the Middle East with our partner Al-Shaya, and the brand really resonates well when we deliver on standard the same execution and same menu that we have in the United States.
Don't miss The Close live every weekday.
Thank you for joining us live on Bloomberg This Weekend. I'm Lisa Mateo. Let's update you on today's top stories. Massive forest fires continue to rage out of control in Spain and France, forcing the evacuation of more than 260,000 people over recent days. Now, strong winds, they've complicated efforts to control the blaze, but authorities say more favorable weather today. It could offer some hope for crews trying to bring those fires under control. SpaceX's Starship, well, it launched into space in its first major test since the company's initial public offering. It lifted off from the company's Starbase facility in South Texas last night and deployed 20 Starlink satellites. SpaceX has spent more than $15 billion developing Starship. It was the rocket's 13th flight. Beef prices, well, they may be coming down. The Wall Street Journal says the Agriculture Department is lifting a more than year-long ban on Mexican cattle imports. Now, they say it'll begin in about a month at the port of entry in Douglas, Arizona, and eventually in New Mexico. U.S. cattle imports have been cut off since last year to stop the spread of New World screwworm. And the cyclospora outbreak has now spread to 4 more states. And the Wall Street Journal says representatives for produce giant Taylor Farms, they've contacted the White House to try and delay the recall. Now, the company is asking for more proof, more time before being linked to the foodborne illness. Now, meanwhile, Taco Bell's lettuce-free burrito, well, it's helped the company recover after a parasite scare. Data compiled by Bloomberg's Second Measure, it shows an improvement in transactions when the restaurant chain began selling the $1 enchiritos. Now, traffic to the company's U.S. locations, it's really taken a hit since authorities tied cyclospora to the lettuce that was used at Taco Bell in several states. David and Christina. Enchirito.
Lisa, is there anything I'm allowed to eat? I mean,
it's tough. Can't I have a salad? I love my salads.
On my road trip this week, we passed a Taco Bell. It looked like it was closed down. I think it's real. No, I think it's actually real. People are avoiding it. But Lisa, thank you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you for that update. Christopher Nolan's film treatment of the Odyssey has had an epic debut. Feel free to groan, Christina, if you'd like to. It's on track to rake in nearly $500 million in its first 2 weekends in theaters.
The 3-hour-long blockbuster is based on the 100-year-old Greek poem that inspired Nolan's screenplay. Joining us now is Emily Wilson, professor of classical studies at the University of Pennsylvania and the first woman to translate the Odyssey into English. Emily Wilson, thank you so much for being here. I have a very strange anecdote to share with you, but it's relevant to how big this has become. I was in Central Park yesterday walking my dumb little dog, and I overheard 2 bros in their 20s explaining the plot of the Odyssey to each other. And I turned around and I said, you know, I have Emily Wilson on our show tomorrow. And he went, what? No way, I gotta watch it. She's the chick who did the new translation. So did you ever think at any point when choosing this career, you would have Central Park tech bro name recognition?
Who could have dared to
on a random Friday?
So weird. It's so funny. I still wake up and think this can't possibly be real. It's wonderful, though. I love that Homer is getting all of this new free press thanks to Christopher Nolan, who was an English major, not a classics major, but he's really put his humanities education to good use.
You brought your brood to see this film, I gather. I'm curious what you thought of it and how you, as somebody who has been so deeply immersed in this work, can you enjoy a film like this? Are you able to kind of enjoy it as a viewer, or are you kind of constantly thinking about whether or not it's sticking literally to the text?
I had a lot of fun. As you said, yes, I took my 3 kids, my teenagers. One of them's over 20, but the others are teenagers. They all had a good time. I thought it was a fun time at the movies. I think there are many ways in which The book is better, but I would say that, right? I mean, this is a fun summer movie, and I think it's very entertaining. And I'm actually really looking forward to many years of discussing with my students how does the book relate to the film. I think it's really going to enrich classroom discussions of the Odyssey all around the world.
I mean, it's interesting because there are people who take issue with the movie. There are people who take issue with your translation. The book may be better, but it's this big. I mean, is it good that people, like you said, are at all just showing interest in it? Does that, do you think, lead to more interest in the classics? And is controversy maybe a good thing to get people reading these texts?
I think it's wonderful that there's engagement of whatever kind. I mean, I think it's really clear that this film is bringing both lots and lots of people back to the physical movie theaters, which is, I think, also a good thing. But it's also bringing people back to reading big books, the sales of the Odyssey and library checkouts of the Odyssey, my translation, but also other translations, by some order of magnitude up this summer, which I think is wonderful. And there's just this new engagement with people who maybe didn't think ancient literature could be for me, realizing this is a really fun read and really interesting in so many different ways.
Just to put a number on it, sales are up 1,420% of hard copy books of the Odyssey.
Crazy, yes.
Interest and remuneration, I think, come hand in hand, which is good. Who's knocking on your door at Penn these days? What does a classics major look like? What's his or her background? Who's showing interest in majoring in the classics these days?
You know, it's really very, very diverse. I mean, it's kids from all different backgrounds. I mean, I think back in the day, there used to be an idea that if you haven't gone to the kind of private school where you do Latin, then there's no hope for you as a classicist. And that's very much not true anymore. I mean, there's every possible background, every possible high school, even if you didn't go to a high school where you read the Odyssey in 9th grade, even if there wasn't Latin offered at your school, there's so many opportunities at the college level to get into this. I mean, one common thread that I see, especially in the big myth classes that I teach, is very often it's kids who've read the Percy Jackson books as children.
My son's very
excited about following up with what is different about the Percy Jackson universe versus the universe that we get in Homer. And we have those discussions, and it's fun.
Do you think that diversity makes for a better, more holistic study of the classics? I mean, we were mentioned you were the first woman to translate this text. Talk to us a little bit about what you think your perspective brought to that text as you looked at the language and searched for nuance. And do people from different places, different backgrounds, different ethnicities bring that to these translations as well?
I think that can be the case, yes. I mean, the first woman headline, I slightly resist the idea that women's work must always be defined by gender. And of course, for many other female Homerists before me, the Odyssey and the Iliad have been translated into many other languages by women before me. I don't think you could pick out of a lineup which translations are by women. I actually don't think that stands up to any particular scrutiny. I mean, I would say that, yes, of course, all kinds of background questions can feed into any interpretive activity, whether it's being a historian, being a journalist, being a translator, being a literary critic. The things that you both know as a scholar, as a reader, and also the things you know through embodied experience are going to feed into your interpretive work in some way or other. I mean, for me, my background in English poetics, as well as in Greek and Latin poetics, seems essential to what I'm doing as a translator. Insofar as my primary intervention, as I see it, is to do with using traditional metrical verse in contrast to the vast majority of modern translators who've used unmetrical free verse or prose to translate Homer. And that has nothing to do with gender. It's about poetics.
Can I ask a dumb question about the way you work? So there's the Homeric question, of course, who wrote this? Did he write this? And the Iliad, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. You mentioned these other translations. So there's Fagles and Fitzgerald and Mendelssohn for that matter. As you're writing this, as you were doing your translation, how much of that was in dialogue with those translations that you'd read previously? In other words, were you working principally from the text in ancient Greek, or were you drawing from at least inspiration from those texts, those translations as well?
Primarily from the Greek, and I don't actually, in terms of my practice, spend much time looking at other translations because most of the time, if I'm wrestling with a particular problem about this line is so beautiful in these particular ways, how can I convey that using completely different words? It's not going to help me if I then look and see, oh, he did that. No, I can't use that anymore because he's already stole that. So I actually need to spend the time by myself wrestling with it. I read a lot of commentaries. I reread the dictionary over and over to try and figure out how else is this word used wherever else it's used in ancient Greek. But it's not really about looking at other translations. So, of course, while I was starting this project, I was meditating on my experiences, especially in the classroom, using many different other translations and thinking about what doesn't get across when I use bagels or when I use Lattimore. And primarily, I thought about both meter and about the vividness, rapidity, and the multivocality of Homer, about how, I think in some ways this is about how Homer can work for the screen as well as for the stage in adaptation. The Odyssey was composed before drama existed, but it has these amazing speeches of characters who are so fully realized, and we fully understand who Penelope is, who Odysseus is.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Emily
Wonderful
Wilson.
to speak with you.
Excellent version of the Odyssey. My other favorite is, of course, Wishbone, the dog. When we come back, we have the pointed news quiz.
In case you missed it, on Bloomberg Crypto.
We've just launched the first regulated perpetual futures product here in the United States, and the interest has been pretty astronomical. We like to, get things right with our regulators at the CFTC on products before we list them. I think there's a lot of both retail and institutional interest in perpetual futures, and we're likely to see that continue to grow.
How do you distinguish between legitimate informed trading versus insider trading? And we know there's also talks with Congress, like, are you going to ban people who may have special knowledge that the public does not know?
So we prohibit members of Congress from trading on our platform. U.S. law already prohibits members of the U.S. government from insider trading on information that they have. It has been exciting to watch Congress explore legislating in this space, and we're largely supportive of legislative efforts to target those contracts where they may have insider information, and we do that work on the exchange to prohibit and detect that activity already.
Don't miss Bloomberg Crypto live Tuesday.
Wednesday, the Fed decides.
Share wars just around the corner, setting the stage for a real debate. Is this meeting live or not?
Our number one objective is getting policy right. And if we get policy right, we can deliver lower prices.
Trust Bloomberg to bring you the fastest coverage and exclusive analysis.
The sum of this is real GDP and the inflation piled on top of it.
That's going to cause inflation that does come into consumer goods in other ways.
Tune in to Bloomberg Surveillance, the Fed decides, starting at 1:30 p.m. Eastern.
In case you missed it, on Bloomberg Surveillance.
The relax row, which is in economy, is, I think, one of the coolest things we've done in a long time. A blocked middle seat in coach is just another example.
Scott, have you had that idea for a long time?
In fairness, Air New Zealand is the one that came up with it, and I've wanted to do it ever since they did it. Of all the stuff we've done, I personally think it is one of the coolest things we've done.
I love the idea of the relax row. When I was a teenager, young in my 20s, flying, when I saw an empty row of 3 seats and the plane taking off, I'd never been more excited. Yeah. And as soon as you got up to about 35,000 feet, I was on it, trying to lie down and move the armrest to make this work.
Yeah. I spent a number of trips when I was young and non-revving doing the same thing.
Weren't you the same? You spot those 3 seats, that's mine. And you see someone outside get up, and not a chance.
Yeah, that actually happened with my younger son. Don't miss Bloomberg Surveillance, live every weekday.
Every weekday, Bloomberg puts the spotlight on a different aspect of global finance. Flows, funds, and the forces shaping markets on ETF IQ. The future of money with Bloomberg Crypto. The players behind major transactions on Bloomberg Deals. Rates, risk, and the cost of capital on Bloomberg Real Yield. And personal finance, retirement, and wealth management on Bloomberg Money. A different topic every weekday, only on Bloomberg Television.
Waited as I have for more than 2 hours for this. It's time for the pointed news quiz here on Bloomberg This Weekend.
Let me tell you what, David Gura and Lisa Mateo, if you change the rules again to benefit David, I will walk off this set. There were some
she has a lot of. I always defer to Lisa. That's why I do so well at this game. It's my deference
giving
to the
her
quiz
cash
master.
under the table. What is happening, Lisa? I thought we had a girl code, and you just shattered that last
just
week.
My respect and adoration.
Comes down to that
week
bonus
after
question,
week.
guys.
Yes,
you know,
it's
it
important.
does. Okay.
Don't discount it.
David, get to it. We're talking about the pointed news quiz, everybody.
yes.
This is the part everybody's waiting for. Okay, so for those of you at home, you're like, what is this game? Okay, here's what happens.
Unclear.
You can play it too at home if you want.
Now pay attention because she might change the rules again.
I might change the rules.
Yeah.
There will be 3 categories, okay? David and Christina each have 30 chips in front of them. They will place their bets on each category depending on how they feel. You know, maybe they feel more confident about the first or maybe not so much the second. We'll see. Are you ready for your 3 categories?
Born ready.
Before you place your bets? Okay, here are your categories. First off is birds. Second is frequent flyers. And third is world records.
Birds. Did you read so big birds this week?
I've read no stories this week, which is part of my strategy going forward here.
So are you going 30, across the board?
I'm going to go 10 across the board.
Okay.
Because birds could be frequent flyers.
I'm also going to.
True.
Lord help us from David Gura puns today. I'm going to do 10 across the board as well.
All right. They have placed their bets. Let's go on to the first question. Here we go.
Right.
Birds.
Lisa.
Chinese exports are surging for what type of bird used in a popular dish? Now, this is despite local demand kind of being soft. So Chinese exports surging for what kind of bird used in a popular dish? What bird is used in a popular dish from China?
Anytime now, David Gura.
He's writing.
Duck.
He even drew a picture for those of you who don't know.
Duck.
Duck is correct.
Hey! Well, that's good for us.
More specifically, Peking duck, but I'll give it to you.
all right.
Okay, there we go.
Soft demand. Why is demand soft?
I've tried it, and I'm not a big fan. I don't know.
Interesting.
But
crispy skin?
yeah, I don't know.
I think it's hard to prepare. They have to do it like really well, is my
Gotta go
understanding.
well.
But,
Yeah.
It's a
My
place
son
very
loves it.
close
I'm
to
not
us
so
here.
much.
At
So
Bloomberg
why is
headquarters. We
this?
should
Why
try
are the
it out.
exports up? And
Get us
this is-
back. Get us back on
I'm
track.
focusing us back down.
She's trying to get us back on track.
Why are they soft?
Soft in the country?
Soft demand,
They
you
just
said.
don't soft demand in the country. They just don't.
see. They're
Not so
over
much.
it.
I mean, they have it all the time.
Yeah,
Why,
all right. Yeah, what do you-
so
okay, all right. So they're
everyone
trying to
else wants
export it.
Getting more popular abroad.
Trying to get more popular. Yes.
All right.
Okay.
There we go. We're moving on to frequent
Feels
flyers.
like my energy is
From
low here. I
ducks,
picked that up
ducks
there.
to
I'm just
frequent
thinking
flyers.
about that duck. Ducks to frequent flyers.
Here we go. What public figure has flown 57,000 miles since June in a Gulfstream private jet, enough to circle the equator twice? See, I know you know who it is, but what is the name?
Of what?
is this person's name?
Oh.
Wait.
Okay.
That was cryptic.
What
Now
public figure?
now I'm confused.
What public figure? What is his name? He's flown
well, that takes that answer.
57,000 miles since June.
Since June.
In a Gulfstream
What's been
private
happening
jet.
since June, I wonder?
Yeah, I wonder, David Gura.
I don't know.
A lot's been happening
I feel
since
like
June.
this was mentioned on the
like
show
a
as
certain
well.
sport,
If
maybe?
You're paying attention to the chat in weeks beyond.
I don't know.
I'm ready. Are you?
I don't know.
He's
Okay.
excited. Okay. Flip it. What do you got?
Gianni Infantino.
Yes! Taylor Swift. You went close. Hey.
I wrote
that
Taylor
was a
Swift,
good-
but then you said it was
that
a
was
guy.
good.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So the president
right.
of FIFA.
Yes,
Yes,
president.
he is the one.
World Cup.
I mean, you have the expanded World
gosh.
Cup, right? There's now 48 teams.
Excuse
so,
my reach.
Thanks. I get her chips. Okay.
Sorry.
But listen to this travel schedule. Okay, June 26th, he went from Miami to Dallas, Dallas to Seattle, Seattle to Miami, because he has to watch all these games, most of them. So it's a tough
not his
schedule.
plane, I should say. He's paying for it. I mean,
No.
it's a chartered
And, yeah, the
plane.
estimated cost for jet fuel, $350,000. That is a price tag.
Quite the carbon footprint.
That as well. Number 3, you ready?
Number 3, I'm
World
ready.
records.
Please continue my suffering, Lisa.
Okay, I did this story, so I want to make sure you guys were listening when I did it.
Oh, no.
Runner Josh Kerr, he broke the world record for fastest mile.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
which Berkshire Hathaway-owned brand designed his shoe?
Such a good question.
Sneaker brand. Think about it. Sneaker
Gotta
brand.
always-
running.
The moral here is always listen to Lisa Mateo. Pay attention.
I can't remember. We talked about this
Pulling back the curtain. You know, we're always trying to get ready for the next segment, listening to
know
what the
it.
director has to say. Always.
Is it Asics?
Tim.
No, it's
Brooks.
not. It's Brooks. Oh, Christina. Yes, he also was wearing a speed suit.
Special suit.
Yeah, special suit
Incredible
from
to
Brooks
see him
too.
shave those thousandths of a second off his time.
It's
every second count.
I don't know if it's not swimming. I don't know how much the speed suit is going to make a difference.
Well, 3 hours, 42 minutes, and 66 seconds. That's exactly
maybe
what it
we
took
can
him.
speed up this
30,
torture that I'm going
Let's
through.
do it. Let's hit the bonus because, Christina, you can win these back.
Do I get all of my points
You
back?
get all them back.
Okay.
All right. The bonus is New Jersey. Okay.
Uh-oh.
That's the category.
Yes.
James Patton was sentenced to 21 months in prison after he inflated sales from $20,000 to $100 million for what type of New Jersey small business? Think about it. New Jersey small business. What type of New Jersey small business?
Okay. Interesting. Right. I really have no idea on this front.
Oh, you don't? Oh,
New
you
Jersey.
wrote so fast.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wrote lawn care.
No.
Trash collection.
No, it's deli. It
Deli.
Was in yes, restaurant. Deli. Remember the story.
Next week.
Nice try.
Next week, you got it coming up here.
Do you see that condescending, for our radio listeners, there's a very condescending, conciliatory pat on the back I just received.
Always listen to Lisa Mateo. You can test your knowledge on all 10 questions. You can take the Pointed News Quiz at Bloomberg.com/pointed. You can find it on the Bloomberg Business app.
I hope it goes better for you, dear viewer, than it did for me.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you for joining us. That's been Bloomberg This Weekend. Join us again tomorrow starting at 7 a.m. I'm Christina Ruffini.
I'm David Gura alongside the great Lisa Mateo. For our listeners on Bloomberg Radio, Masters in Business is up next. For our TV audience, Wall Street Week. David Weston starts right now.
I'm out of here.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute political news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Joe Matthew on the South Lawn of the White House. This is Bloomberg.
This is Wall Street Week. I'm David Weston, bringing you stories of capitalism. Affordable housing is a problem pretty much everywhere across the United States. We go to Austin, Texas to look at one city that's actually doing something about it. Plus, giving grad students a way to finance their education seemed like a good idea at the time. Now, cutting back on the support